2020. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Tim Hale.
Here.
Stephanie Nowers. Here. George McKee.
Here.
Ted Leonard stuck in traffic and will be here as soon as he can. Dan Mayfield.
Here.
Jesse Sumner.
Here.
Tam Bovee.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Let's take a look at the agenda. Any concerns for the consent agenda? Anything you want to pull? Okay, seeing none, the consent agenda will remain. Any other changes to the agenda tonight? Seeing none, the agenda is approved as presented. Mr. John Moosey, could you lead us in the pledge, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now, before we go forward, I'm going to ask Mr. Moosey to come on up to the front and meet Mr. Hayes and I. We have a proclamation we want to read you in a couple. So as everybody knows, this is Mr. Moosey's last official meeting where he's Matsu Borough's manager, and he's here with us tonight. He's going to move on to the city of Palmer, and so I have a mayoral proclamation. Whereas John Moosey has provided exceptional leadership as the Matsu Borough manager, serving over 9 years from May 2011 to June 2020. And whereas John Moosey has extended heartfelt and excellent care to more than 700 borough employees, just significantly raised the morale with his ability as leader to encourage and build up others during difficult times. And whereas John Moosey has led the borough through 8 significant disasters, including the 2012 borough flood, the 2015 sockeye fire, the 2018 cyber attack, the 2018 earthquake, the 2019 willow flood, the 2019 McKinley and Desper fires, and the 2019-2020 COVID-19 pandemic, and the election of Mayor Halter. That's natural. Whereas John Moosey oversaw the execution of budgets totaling $3.64 billion during 9 borough budgets, which provided world-class services and facilities to the residents of the borough. And whereas John Moosey facilitated the borough's departure from the maritime commuter transportation industry and disposed of the associated excess assets. That's the MDC said. Whereas John Moosey also oversaw the expansion and improvement of borough recreational facilities, including the upgrading of our 2 swimming pools, Whistler and Palmer, our hockey rink, the addition of 2 boat launches, and many other improvements to borough trails and parks within the Matsu Borough. And whereas John Moosey led $929 million worth of borough-wide infrastructure development and construction projects, including 7 new schools, 4 new fire stations, 3 emergency medical service stations, improvements to over 20 major borough roadways, building the Port McKenzie Rail Extension Project, and the construction of the Goose Creek Correctional Center, bringing much-needed jobs to the Matsu Borough. Now therefore be it resolved that the mayor, as mayor of Matsu in the borough, hereby celebrates achievements of John Moosey. And in witness whereof I set my hand on this seal fixed the 2nd day of June 2020. Thank you, Mr.
If I could say, it's been a real honor serving you. We have a fabulous staff, and so much so that I do not want to leave the Valley. That's why I looked at the opportunity for Palmer. I got my family here, being more than coming here. There's no better place to live in the Valley. We prove that over and over. Look what's happening elsewhere in my home state of Ohio, in Minnesota. Wouldn't trade this place for anything. So, and I think we all agree with that. And so, thank you very much, Assembly, for the continued opportunity to serve. And that's what I enjoy doing. That's what I want to do is serve our citizens. So thank you, Mayor, for very kind words. And that was an awful lot of work, but it could have been done without the Assembly, and especially the staff.
let's, Assembly and everybody in the room, let's stand and give Mr. Bruce a round of applause. So we had two back-to-back borough managers that worked for the borough for almost 10 years. That's something's kind of unusual in the municipal world, so appreciate the stability. So thank you, Mr. Musi, and now we'll move on with the work of the night. There are no minutes being presented. We have anybody from the cities? Doesn't look like I don't see Mayor Cottle. Anybody else here? School district? How about the state of Alaska? Mr. Snowden is here with us, so please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Assembly, it's great to be here with you again in person tonight, and it's nice to see so many smiling faces too. So, you know, I guess I would start tonight just with kind of a COVID update. I know people are paying attention to the numbers, and as expected, as fully expected, as we move about more, the number of cases will go up and have gone up. They are primarily right now centered in Anchorage and also the peninsula. So not much movement in the valley, so that's good news. You know, the thing that we're looking at there is the meters, the ventilator capacity, ICU bed capacity. So we talked to the governor today, and you know, that's really what we're looking at is the metrics and our ability to manage this virus. It's not something that's going to go away, depending on where you're at on this, whether it's serious or not serious. The reality is it's something that we all have to live with, and something that we will live with together better if we do it together. So hopefully we'll continue to work on that, put politics aside, and come together as a team and work with each other and help to keep each other safe. Regarding the new or the change in the quarantine, I know Mayor Halter, you're excited about the possibility of some tourists. So you know that's not going to be perfect. We're already getting calls from some people on, you know, their state won't test them if they're asymptomatic and some other issues, and we know that. The reality is that we can either stick with a 14-day quarantine, or we can try to do something a little less restrictive, and that's what this is. It's a plan to move forward that's a little less restrictive. So there'll be more details tomorrow during the press conference, but what we're hoping is that people will get tested and that they'll come up to Alaska if they feel comfortable doing so, and they'll have a negative test. If that's not a possibility, there will be some options for them when they come, but that's not really the best option. And so we're hoping people will get tested, and then when they come up here, they will move about safely and practice the physical distancing and everything else so that we can have some kind of tourist season and just economic activity. I mean, economic stabilization is what the governor's looking for. So anything we can do, whether that's a cash injection into the economy, potential, you know, tax relief, things like that can really help out people who are hurting right now. The last thing I wanted to report on was today there was a press release on the DPS dispatch, and I don't know how many of you saw that, but this is a really important decision, and I know that this is something that Mayor Cottle's very interested in since Wasilla does some dispatch, and you know, we have that dispatch center in the Matsu. We're really looking at what's going to be the best option for the state of Alaska and individual communities, and so because it is such a big decision, the governor wanted to put together a working group that will include telecommunications, elected officials, non-elected people, who can really get together and see what's going to work out best for the Matsu. So there will be a decision on that after the working group takes a look at it. I don't know if there are any questions for me tonight. I'm happy to take them if anybody has any.
Good, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Yes, tell the governor thank you for the work on the airport and the reopening of the economies. I think that's a significant step in the right direction.
Mind if I make an announcement real quick?
Okay, please.
And I apologize, Mr. Smolden, I didn't come up and say this before anybody came up here to speak. I do have a piece of tape right here. If you wouldn't mind when you come up and speak, don't touch the podium, I'll make sure the mic's on. If you happen to touch the podium, because I know it's a normal thing to do, I will get up and wipe it. But if you could stand at this tape and then speak loudly, it would be very helpful.
I'm glad I could be an example for you.
Thank you.
$5 fine for touching the podium. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Anything else? I guess we are, probably, is there a joint assembly school board meeting, committee meeting? No, it doesn't seem like it. Any other public relation reports? Mr. Hale?
Yeah, I just want to say that the Jonesville Slipper Lake cleanup happened last Saturday, and there were a lot of people out there, and it was really good. It was a really good time. They had some burgers and dogs and things of that nature, water, and they cleaned up a lot of trash out there. So I just wanted to say good job to the community.
Thank you. Mr. Spropoulos, where are you at there? Any reports? Maybe I missed Mr. Musi. Okay, you're up, Mr. Musi. Sorry, I jumped on it. You handled that very well, Borough Attorney. Your last manager's report.
So, I don't know if everybody heard, but somebody said you turn on the mic for me.
Sorry, you're right.
Good evening. I want you to know that I'm missing my anniversary dinner, my 36th anniversary tonight to be here with you. I'll make it up tomorrow. 3 things tonight. We have Mr. Harris to talk about what's going on in the legislature. And then immediately following Mr. Harris, we are going to be doing an online checkbook, compliments of Mr. Hale. And then the third thing we're going to be doing is Assembly Person Nowers and Deputy Manager Hayes have been working her tails off on this COVID money, trying to get money to businesses. There is a brief report, status report on where we are collecting information and some thoughts. So I'm not going to introduce anymore. We'll have Mr. Harris come up, and he has, I think, some pre-election information.
Good evening, Mr. Harris.
Mr. Mayor, members of the Assembly, before I go on to the election stuff, Mr. Lucy mentioned something, but any of you or anybody here in the valley that has a business that was affected by the COVID-19 issue needs to see if they apply or see if they qualify for the grant that's going on right now through Credit Union One, up to $100,000 per business. So they're pretty restrictive, and you couldn't have benefited by any of the other programs that have been out there related to that. But so hopefully people will take advantage of that. And having said that, I'm going to give a brief report here on what happened yesterday. As you're probably well aware, yesterday, or maybe you're not, but some of you are directly involved in this. Yesterday was the final day for filing for public office, unless if you wanted to try to run as a write-in candidate, which has happened before, but not very successfully in the last. So I'll just kind of go down quickly through the folks who did file. In Senate seat D, which is the incumbent is Senator Wilson, David Wilson. He attracted a lot of folks. He decided they wanted to try and go for that seat. So Mr. Lee, Hunky Lee, Stephen Wright, Bernadette Root Wright, Lloyd Thurman, and Chandler McCain Finch all filed to run against Mr. Wilson as Republicans. Mr. Thomas Lamb filed as a nonpartisan running in the Democratic primary. And not in the primary, but in the general, somebody who's right of me here, I don't know about politically, but at least right of me here, Mr. Mayfield, who will be on the general election ballot. He did the easy way and didn't have to run in one of the 2 primaries, so he'll be on the general election ballot. Compared to that one, that's a Senator Shelley Hughes sits in. She garnered one opponent, Stephanie Jeffers, who's running as an undeclared, so will be on the general election ballot as well. Then we'll go over to, as you can see, one of the Senate seats is not up this time, so in the House, they're all up every 2 years. In the Senate, they're 4-year terms, so they alternate. Next time, 2 years from now, only one of those Senate seats will be up. Anyway, District 7, which Ted Leonard's not here, I was going to give him a hard time about his wife not running, but that's the seat that Colleen Sullivan Leonard is in now, and she's not running for re-election. So there are only Republicans filed in that seat. Christopher Kirka, Robert Yunt, and Lynn Gaddis, who is former Representative Lynn Gaddis, have all filed as Republicans. And then in District 8, which Mark Newman is the city representative, James Chesbrough filed as a Democrat. Kevin McCabe and Alma Hartley also filed as a Democrat, I apologize. And then Kevin McCabe has filed as a Republican. So you'll have Mark Newman and Kevin McCabe running in the Republican primary, James Chesbrough and Alma Hartley running in the Democratic primary. Then in District 9, the old district I used to be in, amazingly enough, Representative Rauscher, the incumbent, as another Republican primary opponent, Lucas Howard, and Bill Johnson is running as a Democrat. He also ran against me years ago. In District 10, which is the seat David Eastman sits in at this time, he's running for re-election. Some guy named Jesse Sumner, is running against him in the Republican primary. And Monica Stein Olson is running as a Democrat. In District 11, the seat held by Delana Johnson at this time, Republican, has a Republican opponent, Alex Feta, if that's right, Feta, as a Republican. And Andrea Hackbarth is running as a Democrat. And last, Representative Kathy Tilton, Republican incumbent, has garnered a nonpartisan opponent, which they'll both be in the general election, named Danny Gregg. So that's kind of the rundown of the local ones. There's a number of other interesting folks that have filed in other areas of the state. There's about, I forget exactly the number, maybe 5 or 6 seats that are unopposed by anybody. None of them here in the valley, though. The 9 seats that the valley holds at this point, they all are contested, either in the primary or in the general, or both. There's one that draws a lot of attention. It's kind of a funny one. I don't know if any of you pay attention to the Alaska landmine, but it's a blog that goes on. It's a conservative, or not conservative blog, but just a general purpose blog, all kinds of things. A fellow named Jeff Landfield said that he has filed against, as an independent, nonpartisan, has filed against Senator Natasha von Emhoff. Happens to be in the district I live in Anchorage. So that should be very interesting because of issues that have been brought up with lakes and permanent fund and other things. So I look forward to rocking around with this kind of a side bit on that one. So that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Never dull moment.
Well, it shouldn't be too dull.
Any questions, Mr. Harris? Welcome back. Hope to have you around the whole year helping us again. So.
Yes, sir. Be looking forward to it. I do. Mr. Moosey has his anniversary tomorrow. I have my anniversary tomorrow of my second hip operation. So, as well as the first time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who's up next?
Can I touch it or do I already $5? Oh, okay.
$5 fine.
$5. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of the Assembly, Eric Wyatt, IT Director here at the Borough. And I'd like to brief you tonight. Do we have the slides?
Just getting there.
Yeah, they come. Good. I'd like to brief you tonight on our checkbook online. So you remember not too long ago, we briefed that we had legislation or movement here that we would have our checkbook online. We wanted a briefing on the status on May 5th, and we had a due date of July 1st. Well, I'm happy to tell you that it's ready now. So, government agency actually doing something on it. There you go. We're getting there. So, that's okay. I know what's on the slide say. So, what I would like to do today is tell you that this checkbook online is now available. Online, there's links on our website. And what I'd like to do is first kind of call out the team that helped us put this together. So our finance director, Cheyenne Heindel, and I sponsored this, and predominantly we just tried to stay out of everybody's way so they could get the good work done. Two of our finance folks, Anna Newberry and Lindsay Bassard, did some quality control of the information was putting out, and then members of my team did some of the programming in the background to put this online and make it available. So I'm going to have two of them speaking here tonight. Jack Horner is our webmaster, and he's going to talk about the open data portion of it. Kenny Clewine is one of our GIS specialists, and he put together the dashboard. Jeremy Bloomstrom is one of my programmers. He helped with some of the back-end data movement, and Leah Jones, also one of my GIS programmers, helped with that as well. So we will have a presentation up here just momentarily, and we're going to, here it comes.
Which one do you hit? Because we've never seen this kind of slide before, to make it full screen.
Okay.
We've never seen this.
Well, what's there advance if I hit the button? But apparently it does.
Normally we can make it full screen.
Okay, well, we'll go with this. This will
Okay.
work, thank you. Okay, so this is just the pretty colors that show what it's going to look like. So these are the team members that are involved that I just talked about. And a couple of things I want to say about this is the data that is presented this evening, or that is online right now, is from January 1st until present. Once we restart the new fiscal year on July 1st, we're planning on just presenting that fiscal year's information online. Now we can pick any date frame that you want to pick. But for right now, the plan is to do January 1st until present, and then on July 1st, we would start over with next year's data. And again, we can modify this, so please just let us know if you'd like to modify anything. And with that, I will turn it over to Jack Horner, our webmaster, and he will tell you about the open data.
Hello, my name is Jack Horner. This is kind of the boring part. I'm going to kind of go over some of the technical details. I'll try and be quick. So open data is really the technical way that most of the web works these days. It is actually the powerhouse behind how Amazon works, and it's the way data is transferred just around. And what it is it's cross-platform. It can work through anything. We can use it internally, or we can make it available to everyone else. We have what's called an open data portal. Not to anyone, or open up. Anyone can go there. They can actually review raw data, see it. You can view it on the open data site. You can use it programmatically if you wanted to build a map. But then also, if you just want to review the raw data without getting any filters from anybody else, you can go there and get it in a lot of formats. Probably the most obvious one would be something like Excel, where you can pull it out of your own spreadsheet. Then the other bit is, how are we exposing internal systems to the world, hackers and all those people that don't like us, or like us too much. How do we do that securely? And so what you see over here is our internal systems, like our logos database, and what we do is we actually do a secure copy through our firewall to another database. That's usually done on a weekly schedule. And what that does is that makes sure that nobody trying to come in from the outside ever gets to the actual data. This is also the way that we make my property available, so that people can't get at our assessment or our property data, but they can still view what's there. So we copy it to a separate database, then we make it available through APIs to our open data portal. And then from there, we make it available to the public or through apps. And so in this particular case, that would be our online checkbook. And next is Kenny Clewine, who will show you the fun stuff.
Thank you, Jack. Kenny Clewine, JS Specialist from Matsu Borough. And like Jack said, basically now that the data is now available in open data, I can start doing kind of the fun part of it. Like Jack said, the data part's maybe boring, the dashboard is the fun tool. We can start drilling down into the data. And so it's really pretty simple right on the top of the page. We basically drill down the data by account with fund or fund stacked with account. And what that's going to give you is a serial chart you see at the top. And then right in the very middle of the screen, you're going to see the fiscal year. And then, of course, like Eric White mentioned, we're doing basically the idea is from January 1 till now, just to get the data out there, get you guys playing with it. And then when July 1 rolls over, that's going to zero out. It's going to go right to zero. And then as we start writing checks, that number's going to go up. As you start doing filters and start diving down into the data, there's two numbers there. The gray number on the bottom will always stay flat. So that's always the current number of expenditures in that fiscal year. The top number is the filtered amount. So as you start doing your drill down, you start analyzing the data, you're going to see what that amount is. And so the first thing you're going to see on the right side is a little scroll bar, because it's kind of, once you guys get into it and start seeing it, the data is really dense. And so in order to actually make it more viewable, you can actually zoom in. So that little bar on the right is basically a little slider. You can grab it, shrink it, and it really expands the data itself. It really breaks out the fund. So now you can actually start visualizing and seeing it, how the money's broken up. And then from there, you can start doing those kind of more fun, if you want to say, filters. I can start putting date ranges. I can put May 1st to May 31st. And now I'm only looking at May's expenditures for that month. From there, we have a vendor search. Now, if I want to type in a vendor name, it's a drop-down list as well. So every single name is already pre-populated for the end user, so you don't have to worry about spelling. But if you start typing it in, you've got the name, you can select it. Now it does a filter, as an example, like MTA. So this is where you see all the expenditures that we do with MTA. And then we also added a division search. So all the funds that tie to a division, and you can also break the fund out by division. So same thing, you can start typing or just select the drop down and then select the division to start sorting that way. At any point you guys get stuck or the public gets stuck, added a note at the very bottom, you can refresh the browser. That takes you back to the beginning. So it's just simply hitting F5 on your keyboard or the little refresh icon will take you back to the start. So if you ever get too lost in the weeds, you can always get back to start. And then I think the fun part is now we also have a pie chart in the bottom right that breaks the fund down via the fund code. So now I can see like area-wide, I can see central fire, I can really kind of see the distributions of our pie. And if I select on area-wide and then I change it to the fund stack with account, I kind of get a full bar that breaks up all of area-wide. So now you can see in the picture basically how area-wide is divvied up and where that money is going in the area-wide expenditures. And then after you kind of drill down, you get to your very final transaction details, which that's going to give you a list of every single transaction and the description that's in our Logos system. So this way, if you guys wanted to start looking at the details, okay, why did we spend $34 at MTA that day? You can actually see that purchase, and you can then ask a question. And so it's all there to basically just drill down to and see. And the very last part, we did have a link along with that little update message to hit F5 if you drill down too slow, a direct link back to our open data site. So if the end user just wants to download a copy themselves, like Jack said, they can just click right from the dashboard and get it to it. And with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Eric White.
Thank you. The last thing I'd like to follow up with here is the cost of putting this online. We had talked about that earlier. This is all systems and software that we already have in place. So all of this has cost us is staff time. And we calculate that to be well under 100 hours at this point. So it was fairly simple. And what I'm showing you on this last slide here is these are some of the other tools that, some of the other information we're making public with the same set of tools. And so this COVID response that we're doing now, we've got a problem reporter, we've got where's my school, find my school, all those other tools that you've seen on our website are all part of the same tool set. So we're able to stand up this kind of information very, very quickly and give you the kind of output that you see here today. One final thing I don't think that we've discussed was the refresh on this data. Checks are run every week on Fridays. So on Friday night, we've got an automated routine that will copy from our financial system and put it out on this website. So once a week, we'll get updates on this data. Again, what you see here can be modified, date ranges and so forth, and I would encourage you to look at it and listen to members of the public that want to use it. And if we've got good suggestions, we can make some modifications to the system. But I think it's ready to go, and I hope you'll like it. So, questions?
I'm just really glad to see this finally implemented. I was curious, is this only going to be available on a going forward basis, or will past years be available as well?
We can make any date range available, so we can go earlier. The audited data, of course, is referred to this as the CAFR, and you're probably familiar with that, and we have had that online in the past, and those things are online in PDF format. You can go back and mine that earlier data that you would like. So again, if you just let us know what date ranges that we would like to look at, we can make that available.
Mr. Hale?
I just want to say thank you. It looks awesome.
All right, yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate this. Thank you, gentlemen, for presenting tonight. Now, who's next? Mr. Nees is headed up.
Deputy Manager George Hayes, Mr. Mayor, Assembly members, Stephanie Nowers, and I have been Assembly member Nowers, and I have been working on this, and I will say she's been doing most of the work. Thank you very much. The piece I had or was working on essentially was the budget piece and kind of how we're going to present to you a list of all of those things, all those recommendations. And we want to do that on the 16th when we bring that forward. Tonight, you all will just be voting on acceptance, appropriating the money. And with that just very brief explanation, I wanted to turn over some details of the survey to Assemblymember Nowers.
Ms. Nowers, you're up.
Thank you. I wanted to.
Your mic's not on.
Sorry. Thank you. I wanted to reiterate Mr. Harris's comments that there is a state program that is offering grants up to $100,000 for businesses, including the Matsu, who haven't received previous funding. And the borough did send out an email to the 8,000+ businesses in the borough to let them know that. And Stephen Hinman goes on the Facebook page, just trying to get the word out about that as much as possible for folks who haven't heard, because it's a real opportunity to help some of the businesses in the borough. So what I wanted to talk about was an economic impact survey that the borough did, and just hit some highlights from this, given that the borough is going to be talking about how to spend the COVID money, and one of the things being considered is help to small businesses. And I know nationally and statewide and in the borough, it's small businesses that have been recognized that have been left behind by a lot of the funding. There has been federal stimulus checks for individuals and unemployment, and some of the bigger businesses are more able, have the capacity to take advantage of some of those programs that have come so far. But we have a lot of small businesses in the borough. 80% are 5 employees or less. So there's 8,000 businesses in the borough. 80% of those, you could extrapolate, are very small. So there's a huge part of the Valley business community. And the reason for doing the survey was we knew COVID was affecting them by the shutdown. We all had anecdotal stories to tell, but here was a chance to ask the businesses how were they being impacted. So before I talk about the results, I did want to say a huge thank you to the IT department, including Kenny. I'm sure I used up 100 hours of his time alone, and some of Eric's as well, and maybe some others I don't know about. Stephen Hinman was very helpful in putting some of the information together and getting the word out about the survey, and George and Finance Director Cheyenne Heindel, and also Nick Sporopoulos providing feedback. So for the survey, this is a dashboard that's available to the public, and I believe, is it linked on the borough website yet? Or we'll have it up shortly. So anybody can take a look at this information, and like the online checkbook, you can look at it from all sorts of aspects. So some of the questions we asked were, how many employees do you have? How reliant are you on visitors from outside the borough? Have you applied for aid yet? How has your business been affected so far? And what do you expect if things don't turn around? And then we asked them by industry, so you could look at the different impacts by tourism, by agriculture, by nonprofits, etc. And so what we found is, we have a couple of graphics, and I think they're at the back of the table, and the assembly members have them, and I'm happy to share this with anybody. Is that we got 1,600 responses out of the 8,000, which is 20%, which, I would have loved to have more, but most surveys were running about 10%. John Bittner with the Small Business Development Center said that was the best response to any survey he had seen in the state. So really happy and thankful for the businesses who took the time to do that. The numbers we saw were 75% of businesses had 5 or fewer employees. 45% at the time of the survey, which is a couple weeks old now since we closed it, had reported their revenues were down by 50% so far. So that was across the borough. The most significant hits were in tourism, retail, childcare, the restaurant food industry, but it was more widespread. If you looked at healthcare, nonprofits, professional services, fitness centers, pet care, the whole gamut is being hit. There's only kind of 2 areas that saw their revenues increase, which was marijuana sales and agriculture. So, but, in terms of thinking, hey, we're just getting hit in a couple areas, it's just in one geography, it's across the borough, and across industries. If you look at Talkeetna, you definitely saw the hit in tourism. 75% of the people responding from Talkeetna, which is like 150 businesses who responded, said their revenues were down by 50%. So that compares to borough-wide of 50%. Sutton area was down 56% of those folks. And then there's a huge business community in Big Lake, Camp Goose Bay, Point McKenzie area. Their revenues were down by 50%. So they, kind of cross the board. And you can, on this chart, you can look by zip code. So if you want to look at Camp Goose Bay, Point McKenzie, just use 99623, and you can look at the results, and then you can break it down and see how many businesses are 5 or fewer employees, how they apply for aid, kind of get a sense. And there's a couple of graphics that assembly members got that show, so this is a percentage of 5 or less employees and 100,000 or less in gross revenues for businesses. So if you just kind of want to look by your assembly district and see the darker the color, the higher the percentage with those small businesses. And again, it's just relevant because those are the ones that have been most likely to have been left out of the aid. So it's still high across the borough, it's 40% or more, but you can see some areas where it's higher. And then the second graphic is places where percentages reported that their revenue had decreased by 50% or more. So you see Talkeetna area up there is very dark. Willow, a little less so in the Fallen-Wasilla area, and then out again in Sutton, some of those areas where they were really reliant on tourism. So just knowing that we have a lot of small businesses that are hurting, and that in terms of aid, if you look at the percentage that said they had applied for aid that are 200,000 or more in revenue, so kind of bigger businesses, 75% had already applied for aid. But if you look at 100,000 or less, 25%. So it just again gives you a sense who has gotten help, who needs help. So I know we're going to talk more about this. I just wanted to highlight some of the things that came out of the survey. It for a large part confirms things but I think I was surprised by how widespread it was in terms of the industries, and we're going to hear more about it. I think with a business program, we talked about that, being able to help businesses and probably individuals as well with some of that funding we're getting. Kodiak, Anchorage, and then Kenai today have started business grant programs, and they've run it in different ways. Some of the work I've been doing with other folks is to look at those programs and try to poke holes in it. County Director Heindel, the attorney, George, the chambers, so the city folks, Alaska Small Business Development Center, and on the statewide level, Florida Group and Alaska Municipal League, kind of saying what are some of the best practices. So the overall goals of the business program, we can talk more about the details and what you guys think about it, but to keep it simple, target small businesses, do it as right as you can in terms of making sure you don't exclude people that should be included, but also hold them accountable. Do it in rounds so that if we have problems, we can fix them, and make sure you get the word out early about programs so you don't feel like people didn't hear about it. So I know we can go over more of the details maybe at our next meeting, but just kind of want to give a general response, or general overview of the results, and see if there are any questions.
Questions? Okay. Now we'll look forward to the results of the next meeting. Mr. Hill?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm hoping this is an appropriate time, but during the manager comments here. But about 4 weeks ago, we had we were told that we were going to be seeing a MOU for the West of Sitna Road access coming before us in a public hearing, and we haven't seen that public hearing be scheduled yet. So I would like to make a motion to direct the manager to set a public hearing for the West of Sitna Road access on the 16th.
What's the status of that, Mr. Murphy? And for the record, Senator Leonard arrived here at 6:33 p.m. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a very good question. It was planned and set for this evening. However, with some changes from ADA on the proposed MOU, they did not feel that they had enough time to do it adequately to have it tonight. It should be on the 16th. Also, in addition, because there's very much concern about public input, we are having ADA speak with our local news media, radio. I did an interview with them, I think, on Monday, and Mr. Leonard was involved in that. So we're trying to get the word out. This is certainly not a ram through. The mayor made it very clear that when we were looking at doing this in April, we're not touching this until after the budget. So the effort is there, but we're not trying to jam this through and get full public notice and ability to comment. And we have very few people, very many people who are interested in this. And we said all along we want to develop, but we want to do it right to protect the environment, and there's good opportunity for that. But first we have to go through public testimony and comment, and that should be the 16th. And Mr. Hayes will be very happy to be here to give you all the details.
So your motion, is that standing for your motion?
That would be fine, Mr. Mayor. I'm just, and then no disparaging the manager or saying he's trying to ram anything through. I've been waiting to see this come up on the agenda, and I thought it might be an appropriate time to bring it up.
He was correct. It was supposed to be tonight. So it's the 16th. So why don't you just do a motion to withdraw your...
I will withdraw my motion.
Okay. Any objection? See it none. Okay. Set for the 16th, I guess. Is that it for Mr. Lucy and reports? Okay. So now, Mr. Stropos. Are you good? Okay. No reports. Madam Clerk, reports.
The clerk's report is in your red folder. It just has a meeting schedule, upcoming meeting schedule, and a quasi-judicial update. I also want to update the assembly on the new call-in number. That hopefully tonight is the last meeting where we have to group all the audience participation and public hearings together. If everything goes right this week, we should have the new number and the new call-in system by the meeting on the 16th. And also, I'm hoping by the 16th we'll be able to have the partitions in between assembly members, so members that want to go ahead and sit up top can. And just so you know, if you prefer to sit down here at the table, all you need to do is let me know.
So when we have like audience participation at the next meeting, we'll have that, and they call in telephonic or be here in person, and then the same thing for each particular ordinance.
Every public hearing will have its own public hearing. You'll be able to open it, and I do believe we read it into the record. We'll say, whoever on the phone wants to speak to this item, press *3. It's like raising your hand on the phone, and it moves everybody up, and they become noted in the phone system that that's what they want to speak on.
So for staff, we'll probably go back to staff reports as a general rule as soon as we get that.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good news. Okay, any comments on the citizen and other correspondence being presented? Here none, they are presented. Madam Clerk, let's read the items and record.
Item 20-108, reporting the conclusion of contract for bid 18136P with Diversified Construction Incorporated with the design build of EMS Station 11-9, project number 45286 for a final contract amount of $1,375,000. Item 2109, reporting the conclusion of contract for bid 18117B with Wolverine Supply Incorporated for the Sioux Valley High School sliding replacement project number 40167 for a final contract amount of $424,606.65. Item 20-110, reporting the conclusion of contract for bid 18064P with FE Contracting Incorporated for the construction manager general contractor for Station 62, project number 10183 with final contract amount of $11,315,281.17. Item 20-115, reporting the conclusion for contract for proposal number 18088P to Diversified Construction Incorporated for the Big Lake Iron Dog Trail Bridges design build with final contract amount of $760,701. Item 2117, informing a memorandum of agreement between the Matsu Borough and the Alaska Department of Natural Resources agreeing to reimburse the state with grant funds and local matching funds for the Settlers Bay Coastal Park Interpretive Plan and Panels Project in the amount of $31,959.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Appreciate that. Are there any persons, no persons to be heard tonight? So we're at the time for public hearings. We'll take public testimony and on the public hearings and audience participation. We're still doing that jointly tonight, so we'll keep that old protocol. You will know when it's your turn to testify when you hear a chime. This is telephonic. Please state your name for the record and spell your last name telephonically. If you're speaking personally here, state your name for the record and then start your testimony. Also, under the old format, please let us know if you have more than one topic you would like to speak to. So if there's one or two ordinances, please let us identify the ordinances and the general topic. So once that testimony has been taken, I'll close the public hearings and audience participation, then we'll take the ordinances in order. Okay, so we got a list here, and then we have 7 telephonically. You want to do the telephonic first, Madam Clerk? Or?
We could, Mr. Mayor, if that's the way you want to do it.
I think we probably should. So let's start with the telephonic
testimony is beginning.
testimony.
Hi, this is Sharon Foley, Foley, and I am calling in about I want to testify no mail-in voting. It invites fraud, but absentee voting is fine like it's been, for people out of state and whatnot, but we can all, whoever can go to the election place to vote, that's how it should be done. ID needs to be shown, and we're all capable of doing it.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for calling in. Next in line for testimony. Hello.
Hi, my name is Carolyn Fleur, P-O-R-T-E-R. I'm calling in reference to the resolution to 0-053 concerning mail-in vote. I strongly oppose mail-in voting, and I urge you not to support this resolution. Mail-in voting is just an invitation for massive voter fraud. It is totally different from absentee voting. Election integrity is the heart of our elections, and mail-in voting undermines that integrity. I've watched how this voting method has worked in Anchorage. We have family there, and it has been an abysmal failure. Our family that is there has always kept current address, and has never one time received a ballot in the mail. They don't get their ballot. On the other hand, we have friends who get several ballots. When ballots are mailed, mailboxes have been vandalized and ballots are being stolen. We don't want to introduce this in the Matsu. We need to be an example of secure elections. COVID-19 should not be used as an excuse to hijack our elections. We hear a much-used term in elections, disenfranchised. Well, those who have had their votes stolen, changed, or who have lost their ability to have confidence in the election process are truly the disenfranchised voters. I ask you to protect elections in the Matsu and do not support mail-in ballots. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Miller, M-I-L-L-E-R. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you fine. Go ahead, please.
I am calling to testify no mail-in ballot because they invite massive fraud. And if you can go to the grocery store, you can go to the mail, or you can go into the ballot places and cast your vote. This is the United States of America, and we should not have our elections taken over by mail fraud. Again, this is Naomi Miller.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, anyone else telephonically?
Yes, this is Beth Freed, F-R-E-A-D. And like the people before me, I would like to state that mail-in voting is a dangerous task. We even have one representative who has been accused and indicted for voter fraud and interference in the mail-in process. There's evidence of this all over the nation. Wherever they have mail-in balloting, there are challenges, and they cost more than in-person balloting. Just think about it. You have to put it all in envelopes and mail it back and include a self-addressed stamped envelope and send it back. And then you have all those people who are running the ballots through the machines. Well, the people are running the ballots through the machines when they vote in person. So I'm not real impressed with the whole process, nor am I impressed with the added expense. And I have encouraged people that if you guys need volunteers, I'm quite certain that people are sending in their applications for serving as election officials, as I did today, and about 10 people notified me that they did as well. So all you have to do is advertise that you're short of help, and we will go ahead and fill in that gap. Thank you very much for considering these issues and for not passing mail-in voting.
Thank you. Anyone else on telephonic testimony?
This is Melissa Hoyer with the Susitna River Coalition. My last name is H-E-U-E-R. I'm mostly just listening to the meeting, but I do appreciate you scheduling a public hearing for the Weston Access Road at your next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else telephonically? If that's, we have another one.
Yes. My name is Kimberly Wakehoff, W-A-Y-C-H-O-F-F. I'm calling to testify against mail-in ballots. I second in particular what Mrs. Porter articulated as to why the mail-in voting idea is a totally inappropriate way to conduct our elections. There's no excuse in my mind to change our election process in this way, as it will only bring fraud into the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on the telephone who would like to testify?
L.D. Howard. Yes, this is L.D. Howard, HRWARD, State House District 9 Republican candidate at 907 Freedom. I am testifying against or in opposition of mail-in ballots. I I've seen it firsthand what they do to areas and to states and even to municipalities. One thing I can kind of echo that you all dealt with me before with the shooting range ban is everyone said they wanted to see the public process work out. Mail-in ballots defeat the public process. If you've ever been to an area that does mail-in ballots, most of the time you see them at post offices, you see them in trash cans, you see them places where people can pick them up, use them. The opportunity for fraud and the opportunity for miscounts and all kinds of other corruption or just, people not exercising their rights properly because there's not a set forth system for doing so is far too rampant in areas. In Oregon, when they moved to mail-in ballot systems, it changed everything. And the one thing with the mail-in ballots or even any voting, casting your vote period, the biggest thing there is accountability, and the word is count. Count is actually really ironic that word is in there because if we can hand count our ballots, we're not that big of an area, it's an impossibility to hand count our ballots. We encourage people to understand that there is integrity into our election system and more people will get out to vote. If they felt their vote was truly counted and truly mattered, it would encourage people to do their duty as Americans to stand up on election days and to vote. So I strongly encourage everyone in the Assembly, do not pass mail-in ballot for the Matsu Borough. We do not need it here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else telephonically? Do we have another?
Yes.
Takes a while, Mr. Mayor, to push them through.
Hello, are you with us? We're waiting at the assembly.
Hi. Sorry, this is Melissa. I'm just trying to listen to the meeting. I've already introduced myself. Thank you.
Hi, Melissa, this is the Borough Clerk. I just wanted to let you know that there's other ways to listen to the Assembly meeting. I just wanted you to know that once the public participation's over, the phone line will be unhooked, so you need to actually go to either Facebook or go to the borough's main borough page and go to the Assembly and stream the meeting that way.
Okay, anyone else telephonically? Otherwise, I'm going to switch to the...
Hello?
Hello, yes ma'am, go ahead please.
Yes, my name is Holly Sheldon Lee, and I have the privilege of calling you from Talkeetna, Alaska. I'm a public advocate in Alaska and a business person. We, before COVID, have never been allowed to testify publicly. So I wanted to thank you for this opportunity. People in the Susitna Valley, where our esteemed mayor first came from, have not been allowed to speak on the phone before, and it has really affected us in the Susitna Valley. So that was the mayor's decision, and I'm not here to talk about that now. I am very happy to be able to call in. Yes, mail-in voting, it invites fraud, and it is not pearl. This is a very serious issue. It is irrefutable evidence of fraud in mail-in voting. It shouldn't even be considered. And that's my statement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for calling in from Talkeetna. Appreciate that. Anyone else on the telephonic testimony?
Yes, this is Alex Hutt.
Go ahead, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well. Go ahead, please.
Okay. I was going to suggest as an alternative for mail-in voting, and it may not be in time for this election, but using a blockchain-based voting system, you essentially have an immutable ledger. You can get a digital identity for Alaskans, and then use KYC, know your customer requirements, to essentially create a secure identity that can then vote on the blockchain and have it always, like there's no way to edit it.
Okay, thank you.
That was all.
Is
Is that walking?
that walking? Okay. Well, I wish I was too. Okay. Anybody else telephonically? One more.
I would like to speak. My name is Melissa Godova. I'm calling out of Wasilla. I just wanted to say thank you for taking this time to give us an opportunity to speak to everyone. But I just kind of wanted to stress the issues that, you know, if mail-in voting was something we could have done in the past, we would have been doing it. If it was such a good idea, it was something that we would have had in place. There's a reason that we need people to go out who show their support and presence to a polling station. It shows their commitment to what they're voting in, and it shows the honesty in their voting system. If we can go to Walmart, we all can go stand in line at Walmart, and at Costco, we can go vote. There is no reason for this. There is countless states finding ballot boxes mysteriously off trucks and in places that shouldn't be, and this is the problem. More accountability. When you have someone in person, you have accountability. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for calling in. Anyone else telephonically? Looks like our 7th. Come on, we'll take your testimony, please.
Hello?
Yes, we're listening. We can hear you.
My name is Desiree Cook, and I'm calling to echo the comments that have already been made by a lot of the callers on the mail-in voting initiative. Since mail-in voting has been proven to increase fraud, I'd ask that the Assembly shut this down. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other callers? They're shaking their head in the back room. No other callers, so. Okay, the audience. I thought there were 7, so we go with telephonic, so I appreciate your patience, and so we'll take you in order now. And you can probably tell that this is working well. We're honing in on telephonic testimony in person. I guess it is true.
Numbers on the post.
But we'll, 2 more telephonic now? Okay. Excuse me, audience. 2 more telephonic. Go ahead, please.
Hi there. Thanks for taking my call. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we hear you very well.
Okay, thank you. This is Tracy Rector, and I'm calling in to testify to say no to mail-in ballots. If everybody can stand in line at Target, Home Depot, then I believe that people can stand in line to vote. And I think that it's imperative and important to show your ID in order to vote. And so mail-in ballots just leave too much leeway. I mean, there was a moment when the stimulus checks were getting mailed to people that were deceased. So if it's anything like that by the federal government and mail, I don't trust it. Mail-in ballots should be a no. And I know that there's absentee ballots, so people can still mail in their ballots if they're like handicapped or they can't get out to vote. And thank you for taking my call. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Another caller? No more callers? Okay. Now we'll go to the people in person. Esther Huddleston.
Hi, my name is Esther Huddleston, and I'm a no on the resolution directing the clerk to move forward with the by-mail election process for the November 3rd, 2020 regular election. The municipality of Anchorage, they have vote by mail only for municipal elections, but state and federal elections, they still go to the polls. And I'm going to read something out of the Alaska State Constitution. Registration of voters, also called pre-registered voters, prior to an election is used by almost all states to safeguard the integrity of elections by ensuring that those who go to the polls possess the legal qualifications for voting. That means we get to go to the polls. In 1970, the state of Alaska passed the registration law. So that's where you, the voter, has to prove that you are the person voting. That's in the Alaska State Constitution. For the municipal elections, it's been in the news. Ballots have been stolen. They've been left in Mail-in election would require ballots to be sent to every registered voter, raising questions on how voters would have their identities verified. Since 2018, the municipality of Anchorage has had a vote-by-mail option. Signatures are verified electronically against voter records from prior elections. And it took the municipality of Anchorage over a year to set up vote by mail. And here the Borough Assembly wants to do it in a couple of months. Another thing that I have questions about is for the next coming election about turning the Matsu Borough from a second-class borough to a first-class borough. Only the state legislature has the authority to do that, and I wonder if you got approval. It's in Title 10, Section 3. The legislature shall classify boroughs and prescribe their powers and functions, methods by which the boroughs may be organized, incorporated, merged, consolidated, reclassified, or dissolved shall be prescribed by law. So I don't think that's legal.
We got the point. Thank you. Mike Coons.
My name is Mike Coons. I'm the president of the Matsu Chapter AMAC Action. We oppose this resolution 20-53. There is widespread documented proof of fraudulent voting when vote by mail is used. There is also widespread anecdotal from friends of mine living in Anchorage of getting 5 ballots for the last 5 owners of the home. From the White House press briefing on 28 May, all the quotes show the huge potential of fraud, as well as strong concern about dumping ballots in the hundreds. Pew studies showing huge potential for fraud show 24 million, 1 out of 8 voters, are no longer valid or significantly inaccurate. These people that are on voter registrations that have not been maintained, 1.8 million dead. From Nevada, ballots piling up outside apartment complexes, piling up in trash bins, no protection from fraudulent use. Per a 36-year Las Vegas Postal Service carrier, ballots to address whom they either moved or died. In her second carry, 65 ballots that people had moved or died as well. California, ballot harvesting and dropping off hundreds of ballots at a time. LA County having 112% of LA County registered to vote. Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany had several more factual incidents of the fraud and potential for fraud in these states like California and other blue states, which because of those actions remain socialist-run states. This isn't even counting the local media reports of mail-in ballots being stolen from mailboxes, trashed onto the road, people that were registered to vote not getting their ballots. I know that the stated reason to do this one-time mail-in balloting is because of this China virus. We also know the unstated reason, that being to ensure that many fraudulent votes, be they dead people, stolen ballots, ballots who people no longer are in the state, much less that those addresses can be filled out, fraudulently signed, and sent in to ensure that this state and this borough had the election that the socialists want, a strong assembly and a strong legislature that is controlled by socialists. Therefore, the big question is how the ballots will be, if they will be even verified. So no, not no, but hell no. Because of this China virus, people are more fearful of the government than the virus. We are more worried about voter fraud and government actions like this than the China virus. Prior to opening phase 4, people standing in line to get into businesses, if they can do that, they'll stand in line, long lines to vote. This resolution must be killed and buried 12 feet under. Thank you.
Joe Carmen.
Thank you. First of all, I agree with the people who have testified that in-person voting is the only true, transparent method of voting. Second, I'd like to say that I read the amended version of the resolution tonight, and I appreciate that from what I've read, it looks like you're not going to mail out the actual absentee ballots to everyone. because of all the stuff you've already heard with the issue of fraud. But instead, you're going to mail out instructions to apply for an absentee ballot, is what it looks like to me. You can correct me later since I know you won't talk to me now. However, I still see a very big problem, and I don't know if I'm reading it correctly or not, but this is the problem I see. If you send multiple mailings to one address, addressed to each voter, then you still have multiple names out. And if I get 10 mailings when only my husband and I live there, I could send back 10 in these names. Now I have actual names of people I could request a ballot for. And voter fraud could still happen. So I have a suggestion for that. I have a whereas and a be it further resolved. Whereas, multiple mail-in voter mailings addressed to multiple people at one residence encourages voter fraud. Be it further resolved to address that issue of voter fraud with multiple mailings at one address. The Assembly, this is just an example of what you could write. The Assembly instructs the borough clerk to send only one mailing to each residence with general instructions how to request an absentee ballot. I think that would resolve that issue. I do have one other small issue. I object to your timer, and the reason being is I feel like we're being controlled and not allowed to say everything if we have one final point to make. I don't think that's, you shouldn't be controlling us, we should be controlling you is my issue. Okay?
Don't clap, hold on. We're not going there. Okay? But I appreciate your testimony, Ms. Carmen. And, you know, sometimes that timer is a little obnoxious. But it's one way to have every 3 minutes, because you can tell we're having a lot of testimony tonight, telephonically and in person. So, let's see. Where are we at here? Bert? Hideaway? How is that destroyed that way?
Slaughtered like normal.
There we go, excuse me, sir. Give me the correct pronunciation, please.
Bert Hufftel.
There we go.
I'm here tonight about the mail-in voting. I concur with everything that I've heard behind us here. I believe on one of the recent news channels out there, they announced that we have 111% voter roll registration for the entire state of Alaska. So we're already 11% over what we currently have just for voters available to be able to vote here. The opportunity to be able to have voter fraud is enormous. I know I live in a residence that has had at least 12 different owners at one point in time. If I was to receive mail-in voting ballots, I'm pretty sure I would probably see one for many of those people that are no longer here. Being in the Big Lake area, it makes a difference on how many different populations and how many people have lived in certain locations. We're looking at it as a statewide level. If you were available last night for the Zoom that was held about election integrity in our state, they did a very good comprehensive review over the voter mail-in voting throughout what has happened in different states. Even our own state is not fraudulent or been found in that regards, but there's a lot of questions about what happened in 2010, 2014, 2016, and as recently as 2018, which we've got a candidate out there right now that's currently got charges against them that we don't know if it's happened yet or not, but it keeps coming up year after year. We have elections that are won by one vote. It always seems to be down to the ballots that are mailed in, the absentee ballots that always seem to determine the race here in Alaska. We had a coin toss last year, I believe, from one of the 2 years ago when we had an election that we just flipped a coin, heads or tails, you win, because it was determined as a tie. This is a ripe opportunity for fraud to happen within our state. I know there is a lot of dishonest people. One of the elections that they talked about last night here in the state of Alaska, there was several of the, and I'm not sure of the exact number, but it was quite large, that had the same handwriting and the same signature, not the same person's name, but the same person doing the actual signing. This is very well documented and it is out there. Our Lieutenant Governor Kevin Meyer was on this discussion last night, so was plenty of our other legislators that are out there, from Reinbold to Showers to Eastman to you name it. If they had any interest about our elections and the integrity, they were there last night for this live Zoom video. It was very informing. They brought up a lot of evidence, a lot of documented evidence where voter fraud has been caught in other districts. The machines that we have here in the state of Alaska, we are in what they had shown in the pictures as being in the green, as being 100% hackable. They even showed a guy during one of our elections. They had done a live stream or a video of him hacking into our current election rolls. And because he didn't want to get in trouble, he didn't change anything. But the availability for him to do it was there. It was within seconds of his control to change the election results. Also, our voting machines do not tally on a one-on-one voting. They are done in percentages. I would like to know how we can have a 99.26% vote for a candidate if, let's say, we had 100 people voting. Where did that 26% come from? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Nice tone of voice, too. Hunky Lee.
Hello, my name is Hunky Lee, and great to see you, everybody, and nice to meet you. And my name is Hunky Lee, and I'm running for Alaska State Senate District D, which is Greater Wasilla area. And so I want to talk about this Minnesota event. We all agree that it's tragedy. Some people passed away during the arrests. And we all love African Americans. We all love all different races. This is America. We love everybody. But I want to emphasize we should also give some love to our police officers, EMT technicians, and firefighters, the first responders, because many times they become the target of criticism. But we are human beings, and police officers, they are human beings too. Sometimes mistakes happen, okay? And if I drive my car, if I make a mistake when I drive my car, somebody can die on a highway. All right? So I don't think it's fair that we blame only police officers who risk their life and limbs to protect our lives and limbs and our property. They are our heroes. Now, let's do some problem solving. So how can we prevent death of people during the arrest? Well, perhaps we can require police officers to carry tasers. Perhaps tasers are a safer way to restrain people, because it's electric shock, it's instant. And perhaps we can come up with some brand new invention using our technology. Perhaps we can invent bullets that are electric shockers. So non-lethal bullets. You can shoot from distance, but when the bullet lands on a person, give that person electric shock. Perhaps we can invent something like that. So there are a lot of protests going on in other states, and it's great privilege that we live in Alaska. To me, Alaska is the last America where people can speak freely, and it's a great honor to be in this wonderful state. Alaskans are fantastic. I'm a huge fan. I came to Alaska 5 years ago, and I fell in love with it. Fell in love with the people. And well, regarding the protests, as long as it is peaceful, President Barack Obama said there's some value to it, and I agree. But when it comes to violent protests, to me, it seems more like, people are bored at home because of coronavirus, so they want to get their yayas out of this excuse. And also, other people are poor because they didn't get paid, so they want to steal, break into windows and vandalize and steal food. So, yeah, I think that's what's going on, okay? Thank you. Good night. Bye.
Thank you. Cecilia Wiskoff.
Hi, my name is Cecilia Wistoff, and I was born and raised here in Alaska. Great state. Been in the borough now for almost 30 years. KGB, great road. But I came here tonight voice my opinion about the voting. As everybody else has said, I don't even think I can add anything. A lot of people did their homework. A lot of them. The lady second on telephonic, she was eloquent in how she spoke as well. And it's the truth. You're just opening it up for fraud. It's just a bad thing to do for our elections for the United States of America. Alaska's vote might really count this time. So please, no mail-in voting. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Wassoff.
It's all been said, I'm against the mail-in voting, and, you know, I don't even like how they can show their voter card. It doesn't have a picture on it, so, but I know that's legal now. Go back to picture ID, state-issued picture ID for voting. There'll be no fraud. Thank you.
Thank you for being so brief. Brian Endo.
My name is Brian Endo. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Manager, members of the Assembly and staff. As you know, I sent an email in and I'm against the voting by mail. I believe it invites fraud. We have Walmart, Home Depot, many stores open, and if they can be open and they can support customers, we can have people at the polls. We don't need this. We have absentee and early mailing, we have absentee voting and early voting. So those would accomplish any kind of issues that people would have with COVID ID, etc. Now I want to get into some of the numbers that you guys presented here. So we have 70,000, this is in your packet, 70,000 registered voters. About 30% of those people, I'm being conservative on this, probably vote. So that's about 21,000. You have 20% of that 70,000 is undeliverable, so that's 14,000. That means there's 35,000 left. Those are 35,000 opportunities for fraud. So then you want to take the dollar amount of that too. You got 494, 910, and 147, 147. You subtract those numbers, you get 347, 763. My numbers are wrong. You guys can write them down and do your actual calculations there. You have 56,000, that's 70,000 minus the 14,000 ballots that are probably going to be going out. So that means it's $6.21 a ballot. You multiply that times 35,000, you're wasting at least $217,351 at least. So on another note, as you can realize, I'm against this. But on another note, I made reference the other night, and I should make reference here, to something that happened during our election. Now, the clerk, Lonnie McKechnie, had denied me the opportunity to actually do a hand count. She said she would not do that. She said I could go to the assembly, but that's a policy that needs to be changed. It's wrong, because that denies me the opportunity immediately to do a hand count, even if I have to pay for it, because that opportunity was not allowed me. So I'm making that public. I'm asking you guys that you should probably change that, because other people could come in here and they might want to do a hand count on a vision or whatever. These voting machines are easily hacked into. So the integrity of an election can only be challenged by a hand count. It can't be challenged any other way. This kind of thing is going on in different parts of the nation, as I referenced the other night. This isn't just the only place. It's a block to voter integrity. So just want you to look into that as well. Thank you very much.
Steve Renner.
Don't forget to call if you're in the area.
Members of the Assembly. Okay, Steve Renner, 45 years, your district. I watch you closely. So there's a couple of things in here I want to bring up. I just don't like the ifs and the ands. You know, I mean, we're looking at this COVID thing from a perspective that so far I don't think it's really panned out up here. I think the biggest consequences of this whole pandemic are yet to come from all the jobs we've lost. We will see the largest rate of foreclosures in our housing this state has seen in a long time. You wait come November, December, January, people will be losing their homes right and left as a result of accepting this panic. Now, I'm here tonight to talk about where I stand. I firmly believe that God endowed us with the blessings that we have on this earth and that we are obligated to protect them. We're responsible to administer those. Everything has blessed us with our liberties, our freedoms, our land, our country. And most of the time, I find myself gathered here tonight to deal with a violation of one of God's commandments. Thou shalt not steal. Fraud, by the way, is theft. And so is our property taxes on my property. God told us to leave an inheritance to our children. Every time I come here on the issue of property taxes, it's stolen a little more. What does that have to do with this voter fraud? Well, number one, what about those who are elected to represent me? A few votes we saw in the last election, Tim, can make a big difference. Now, this fraud opens up Pandora's box, and my biggest concern is this. Will this be a precedent for the next time around? Will we continue to accept this as a solution? You know, the people in this country really don't need the borough to tell us how to vote. All we need is a ballot box, a ballot, a booth, and someone to check the IDs of those who are voting. Okay, so I'm talking here about theft of my vote, and it's truly a tragic day when the institutions that are to provide civil order in our country become a party to this theft. And that's my whole thing tonight is we don't need to change what's going on. I've heard the Walmart thing. I've heard some great discussion on that. The part that really bothers me, though, tonight is the financial thing of this whole thing. We're looking at what's going to cost if we do this or what we do that. You know, this is really the first time I've ever seen this borough even pay attention much to cost cutting. So I'm saying, get rid of this. It doesn't fit. And thank you, folks, for being here tonight.
Okay, thank you. John Miller.
Don't forget to share.
Thank you for allowing me to speak, and thank you for the people participating. I want to look to see who they are because I recognize them from the front of their face better than the back of their face. I'm opposed to this mail-in voting, and I have to agree with everybody that's spoken already. I think this is just a representation of what people feel that I talk to every day. They just think it's very, very susceptible to fraud, and they think it's basically just a way of manipulating the elections and who gets elected. And if we see the people nationally that are actually pushing this down our throats, it's pretty obvious why they're doing it, because they probably couldn't get elected in a fair election, so they have to change the whole system. The point that I'd like to make, though, is our existing voting system. And several people have alluded to the fact that it's very easy to hack, and it's very easy to susceptible to fraud and everything else. And I think that's what we need to be looking at. Before we add anything on top of a system that's already on shaky ground, I think we need to really delve into the integrity of our elections, because our right to vote is our voice. That's our foundation of our free society, is our votes. That needs to be absolutely verifiable, needs to be transparent, it needs to be honest, and people need to have confidence that the system cannot be rigged. It's got to be above board. That's the most important thing. right there. All these other efforts and everything else aren't going to amount to anything if our elections can be manipulated. And that's what I want. I want to know that our officials that are involved in this are watching out for me to make sure that I have a voice. And my voice is, and my consent is my vote. And if there's any way of tampering with that and discrediting that, it needs to be changed. So mail-in ballot voting is just way beyond the pale. And I don't think there's a person in here that's for it. Otherwise, they would have got up and said something, you know. And I don't think as the general population is for it. It's pretty obvious. But the bottom line is our representatives need to be actively protecting our voting integrity. Thank you very much.
He was very eloquent, I realize that. That's fine. James, pressing. President.
Yes, Mayor, John just spoke for me.
Okay, he did a great job too.
One of these days I could get a chair up front there, we can't stand that.
Okay. So that's the list. We have two, Mike Coons and Brian Engel, that signed up twice. Did you guys want to speak again?
Under general,
Okay, I guess.
general comments.
Yeah.
Hang on to your seats. My name is Mike Coons, and I'm one pissed off American. This last week, we who have taken the oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, have had to endure watching the violence that our mainstream media calls protests. Damn few call it what it is, riots. And the purpose of those riots is to help the socialists that are elected to our so-called leaders. For far too long, those socialists have been doing what they can to take over our nation with attempts to subvert our votes, to subvert our freedom of speech, religion, assembly, and to redress the outlandish grievances imposed by those elected socialists. Yet, it is okay for the likes of Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and others to protest, and their idea of protest is to kill cops, beat up citizens because they dare to stand up for their businesses themselves or those they serve. Then those that support those brown and black shirts, and make no mistake, they are just like Hitler's brown shirts and Lenin's and Stalin's black shirts, want to arrest us for using our Second Amendment right to defend ourselves with the use of deadly force against terrorism and anarchists. No, damn it, no. Many here are Cold War warriors, and we fought and won the Cold War against the USSR. Many here have fought against dictators like Saddam and Taliban and Al-Qaeda, and we won. Yet, over all those decades, we are now having to fight against socialism, communists, and yes, those that would be dictators along with their violent supporters here in our assemblies, legislators, and Congress. Make no mistake about it, we won then, we will win again. I am calling out everyone who, through resolutions, ordinances, and statutes, would deny us our God-given rights. I call those out for what they are, socialist communists, the worst of the worst. And I say to each and every one of those, just because I don't wear the uniform of my nation anymore, by God, that oath that I and so many others took, we still uphold it, and we will do all we can to defeat those that are today trying to take away our freedoms, but denying our liberties through resolutions like this latest attack on one of our most sacred, our vote. We are Americans. We have bled and died for far too long to keep our Constitution intact, along with those liberties enshrined in the Bill of Rights. If we must, we will bleed and die for the same Constitution. But make no mistake, like the enemies we have defeated, we will defeat these domestic enemies. And if it comes to bloodshed, so be it. Give me liberty or give me death.
No. Knock it off. Okay, let's see. George Rauscher, I think you're speaking on Voting by mail?
Thank you.
Welcome, Representative. Nice to see you tonight.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. My name is George Rauscher, and I want to thank you all for a chance to speak. I don't have much to say, but I do rise against 20-053. And I'd just like a chance to restate the seriousness of voter integrity and the seriousness of your vote to incorporate this type of process, whether or not to do so. But it's not so much the number of people that have spoken tonight. It's more about what they had to say and the many reasons that they spoke, which I feel are very important to your decision. The state of Alaska decided against this measure for many of the good reasons that were spoken today. And it's my belief that as elected officials, we owe it to our voters to protect the integrity of their vote more than anything else. And I believe that with all my heart. I believe that as you go to deliberate on whether or not you're going to vote on this tonight or against it or even to postpone it, I just ask that you consider those things above anything as you go forward tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rauscher. Now we have 3 more telephonic, is that correct? That's correct. So let's go ahead and take the first one.
Last chance to call in.
Hello, this is the mayor. Are you on the phone?
Hi, yes, I know you. Hi, my name is Absentee. I am hoping that everyone can hear me at the moment. So as far as mail-in voting goes, I have obviously never voted by mail, so I don't know what all is required on the ballot, but I would assume that probably a driver's license or ID number is required, possibly your voter ID card, and all of those things can be traced back to some sort of computer log system. So I would think that the chances of people sending in fraudulent ballots would be fairly low, just because of that fact alone, that it's traceable back to a single person. So if you were to make up a number, someone would say, oh, that's not in our system, duplicate numbers, people voted twice, obviously. So I do know statistics say that mail-in voting actually helps our older demographic. It has been shown that people 55 plus tend to be the people that use mail-in voting the most, which is actually our most vulnerable demographic right now during COVID-19. So I think this is something we need to consider for the safety of our most vulnerable demographic here in Alaska. And I think that because the found percentage of mail-in voter fraud seems to be very low across all the states that typically use mail-in voting. I think it's like Utah, I know Hawaii does it pretty often, there's a couple others. I think that there's kind of a balance of risk, and I think that there is a little risk of hurting some of our people that don't want to go out during this COVID-19 than there is of an actually great enough percentage of mail-in voter fraud to affect our election. So I think there's I would say I advocate for the mail-in voting purely for that reason. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Absentee voting.
Good evening. My name is Melody McCullough, and I am calling in opposition to mail-in voting. I have a few things to say. First, I want to say we the people, by the people, for the people, by the people. You work for us. We have already had our voices silenced here in the Matsu, and now you're trying to take away our right to in-person vote. I agree with Carol, that spoke earlier. I 100% agree with Mike Coons. You are taking our liberties away from us by allowing us to go in and vote. I have signed up to be one of those people at the voting stations as an employee of the state of Alaska. I am 58 years old, so I am compromising my own possibility of health to go and serve the state of Alaska by being there for in-house voting. None of this mail stuff. It leads to fraudulent voters. It leads to people that have passed away voting and their votes being counted. I want to see a clean election, and mail-in voting is not the way to do it. That's all I have to say. You guys have a great evening. Thanks for letting me have time to testify.
You're welcome. Thank you for calling in. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and Assembly members. This is Jill Valerius. I'm calling in from Palmer. I'm actually in favor of vote by mail, and I'm not going to go along and repeat all of the things that have been said today, other than I would refer you all to look at the Brennan Center for Justice. There's a whole list of resources with regards to voting by mail and potential voter fraud claims and that sort of stuff. I'm more excited to speak tonight. I'm mortified by some of the testimony that's happened already this evening. We have an issue in our country right now, and we have an issue with racism. And for anybody who is white in our country, we don't have a lot of legs to stand on when it comes to this, and I would really encourage people to do some reading. We have systemic and societal racism in our country. We're founded on it. And I think we really need to start looking at this and addressing it. And some of the comments tonight have been absolutely appalling to me. And for that, I just needed to go on record and say something, because that's not the world that I want to live out the rest of my life in. So I thank you all for your time and appreciate what you're doing for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there more telephonic? Yes. Okay, go ahead. Next, please.
Hi, my name is Linda Branson. I'm calling from Houston, Alaska. I am a 58-year-old disabled person, severely disabled, and I managed to go and vote. And the reason I go and vote is it's my right. I feel good about going to the ballot, showing my ID, conversing with other people in the line to get varying opinions. It is my right to vote in person. And I'm kind of upset at people who say, oh, well, this is for people who can't get to the polls. I can tell you that it is hard for me to get to the polls, but I do it. Now, if you are disabled, the state of Alaska does have the opportunity for those who wish to do absentee voting or early voting. The system is already there. It's not broken, don't fix it. I know that sounds kind of silly, but that's just my thoughts. Again, thank you for taking my testimony. I am against mail-in voting.
Is there more telephonic? There are. Okay. Next speaker, please.
Calling in.
Hi, it's Kevin McCabe. I'm calling from Big Lake, Alaska, representing myself. I rise in opposition to this mail-in voting that is appears to be a partisan resolution or put forth to the Assembly. There is no reason for mail-in voting at this point. We already have the absentee mail-in absentee voting, as well as early voting. There are plenty of opportunities, and it's not even about the fraud that numerous other testifiers have discussed. It's about the Alaska voter rolls, which are among the worst in the nation for being properly vetted. And as somebody said, 112% voter turnout in California. We don't have the proper voter rolls to put this mail-in ballot in place right now. If in fact we ever wanted to do it, that would be the first step. So once again, I'm in opposition to this, and I would appreciate it if the Assembly would vote this resolution down. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for calling in. More telephonic? Okay, next speaker, please. No more? No more telephonic? No more. Okay. We have another speaker? Yes, we have another list.
Yes.
Candy Miller. Mr. Engel, did you want to speak again?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Welcome.
Thank you, everyone, for taking our opinions. I did become aware of this issue, I'm not sure how many years ago, in the state of Alaska. And also, people I have communications with had sent emails about what was going on in other states, and even someone that had appeared, a man that had appeared before a judge, admitting about the tweaking and the manipulation of voter machines. And it was very eye-opening. So what I wanted to say is I am against the mail-in ballots because of what I have learned from people's experiences both in the state and the nation. And for friends that you have in other states, you can go to truethevote.org. There is a nationwide awareness of this that has been becoming more and more aware in the nation. So your friends and in other states that want to be aware of what is happening and how they can get involved in their state of awareness and how the people are getting the truth out there, but also to help in their community to clean the voter rolls. There are specific ways that individuals can help. So go to truethevote.org. I believe this is truethevote.org.
Okay, thank you. Well, that closes up the list we have for participation. Come on forward. Does somebody else want to speak? Yeah. Right. I guess we got more lists. Go ahead, sir.
Last chance to call in.
My name is Dave Maxwell, and there's a couple of things I've been kind of pondering. So, who came up with the idea of this mail-in voting and why? Is there any way we can figure that out first? Or if they'd like to testify as to the reason. Is it all COVID? Because of that, and that's the only thing I can come up with. And if that's it, that sounds like an opportunist. That's all that sounds like. To achieve an agenda. Because COVID, or Wuhan flu, whatever you want to call it, has been highly politicized. Anybody disagree? It's hugely politicized. There are places in the nation, in the world, where it has had a devastating effect. In Alaska, I don't think so. No, it's not here. Not like it is in Italy, New York. We don't live on top of each other. We have lots of space. So why did we do it here? What was the motivation? Who was the opportunist and what was your motivation? That's my first question. That leads to me to suspicion. Then it raises a little background of people that I'm on their email list. Tom Fitton is one of them. He runs Judicial Watch. This is a man who regularly goes after FISA requests from the federal government. He has sued multiple states now for voter fraud. Think of it. For voter fraud. And we're inviting that here? I don't get it. So if you need to do some homework, there's one, Judicial Watch. That is a good, reputable website. Tom Fitton is the president. The other thing that tends to bother me is what underlies the world view. I'd like to know what your belief system is when you prioritize marijuana shops over churches. Essential, non-essential. That one got under my skin as well. I don't get it. I really do not understand that at all. And so, whoever's doing that, I have not got an answer to that, but whatever is motivating this, we have a real competitive set of standards being fought for, and people are going to resist losing those standards. And so what we're seeing now in Minnesota, New York, Washington, D.C., these are value systems that are being battled for. That's what it starts to look like when it gets out of control. So I would just question the motivations and what do you want to see as an end result.
I'll just say this on the COVID. Governor Dunleavy set out every health mandate that the Matsu Borough followed in the Matsu area came from the governor's office. And we tried to follow his mandates religiously because out of respect for the governor. And that's what happened in the Matsu Borough. Lynn Cade.
I'd rather be at home gardening, but alas, you have put something on the agenda which I found it necessary to come here and testify for. What could possibly go wrong with mail-in ballots? How many people are automatically registered to My Alaska when they file for a PFD? All of these registered voters, many who have never voted in their lives, are now being sent a ballot. What will happen with these ballots, which are not really wanted by apathetic citizens? I leave it to your imagination. Not to mention those still on the voter rolls who have moved or died and have not been purged. How many people typically vote? It's usually no more than maybe 30% at the most. But even if it were 40%, how many ballots are left in limbo for someone to latch onto? As you mail out all of the ballots, how many will be tossed in the unlocked post office garbage cans? What could possibly go wrong with that? Even if only 5 upstanding lawful citizens cast their own ballots, where is the chain of custody with mail-in ballots? How many people will touch that ballot before it is counted? The mailman for outgoing mail, the mail sorter at the post office, the mail carrier delivering it to the borough, the staff at the borough sorting the mail, the person receiving the ballot, the person processing the ballot. I count 7 touches on a minimum by unknown people. What could go wrong with that? As a longtime employee of a police department, I can tell you of one sure way to destroy the value of evidence. It is by breaking the chain of custody. We were required to have a witness anytime we went to handle evidence, and they had to sign off that they observed that we were processing it. It had to be signed out and witnessed. When you don't have witnesses at every step, what could possibly go wrong in the chain of custody with mailed-in ballots? The law says that ballots are cast in secret. Many mail-in ballots require a signature on the back of the envelope. How does signing the back of an envelope protect the secret ballot? How does having someone at the municipality or the borough open and look at our ballot, how does that protect the secrecy of our vote? These ballots are processed through the same machines as ballots cast in person. Who is feeding the machine? Who is in charge of securing the machine? Again, is there a chain of custody? What could possibly go wrong with that? Then there are the machines themselves. I participated in the Zoom meeting last night, which you heard referenced here by other speakers. Many of us have watched the video available on Google, which is called Fraction Magic. It shows how easily these machines can be manipulated or hacked. If you haven't watched it, a quick Google search will find it for you. I strongly encourage you to watch it before you cast a vote in favor of any mail-in ballots. There are already issues with voting in person which need to be fixed. You don't fix an existing problem by making it even more vulnerable. In my opinion, mail-in voting is just one more way to undermine the integrity of our elections. There is lots of leverage being applied to push this agenda throughout the United States. It is as though the same memo was sent to one of our political parties and the media. Many of the arguments are identical in so many jurisdictions, and the fear-mongering taking place over COVID seems to have the end goal of mail-in ballots. Thank you very much.
Thank you. David Eastman.
Mr. Mayor and members of the family, I'm listening to testimony today, reminded of some of my own experiences the first time that I ran for office here in the borough. I just wanted to share a couple of anecdotes. One of the things that hasn't been brought up today, but probably is worth your consideration, that Alaska is a very transitory place. And so some of the statistics and numbers that we talked about in other states don't quite match up, because last time I did the numbers, Alaska had more transiting folks coming in and out and moving around than any other state, or even Washington, D.C. at the time. And that's how I came to explain why, as a first-time candidate, I pulled up in the voter registration list and started looking at voters, and there were 6 people registered at my house that I didn't know. I assume they'd probably been registered there for quite some time. The other anecdote that I wanted to share was that mail doesn't always work the way it's supposed to. I know when I sent a letter out to the voters in my district, that first campaign, got a whole lot of them back. In fact, I got more than 1,000 letters back, and they just weren't delivered for whatever reason. They kept coming back for months and months. A couple of them came back about 2 years later. In fact, I think it was finally the last one. So there are some things that you can do about improving the voter list, and I hope that that certainly is done. And there are some things that maybe you can't do about improving the mail, but understand that those circumstances just can't be fixed sometimes, and that's part of why some of these concerns, I think, are valid, because we want to make sure that our elections are done right, and sometimes you just can't control all the factors when you start throwing things in the mail. Thanks.
Thank you. Michael B. I can't read the last name. Michael B. Anybody got any Michaels here? Otherwise, I'll just scratch that off. Mr. Haber, you want to speak? Come on forward, please.
I took about 3 items.
Just go ahead and speak, please.
And just 9 minutes.
Go ahead. No, you're going to go ahead and speak just like everybody else, please.
No, 9 minutes. You said in the beginning how many items you're going to speak on, and then you're going to multiply.
Go ahead and start speaking, please.
I start my clock at 9 minutes. My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I live in Matsu Valley. I follow the public process. When the public process is done appropriately, decision made by the governing bodies will allow the public country. First, I'd like to go into another subject that's not been addressed tonight. And that is what happened last week. The borough passed a budget. A budget when you were told last week by me. When you had the amendments that were not available to the public, were not online, but you passed the budget anyway. You passed a budget when you were warned that you knew, like on a Tuesday, when there was issues of revenue not coming in like they expected, with ambulances, fees and so forth, told you Thursday, you need to get the borough manager, you stop and get the borough manager to do a revised situation of what has happened financially in the city and the borough. What's happened in the state. But that didn't happen, you went proceeding. And then a note here, when I addressed concern wasn't online, borough clerk said that was the case. It was, but it wasn't now. But you proceeded and you passed the budget. So when you deal with a checkbook situation, you're talking about the transparency. And we'll spend a lot of time in this meeting. Where's the transparency of people? Where's the opportunity for the public to be engaged and deal with the budget? Where's the information? Did you obtain any information at the effort? No, you didn't. I'll leave it on that first. Now, I'm concerned about the way the structure's gone. You consolidated all the things on the agenda into one, but you've been told that each one can be 3 minutes and multiply it, but you're creating the confusion. This is confusion to the public. If you're dealing with one issue, speak on that one issue. But you create confusion, and then now you're going to address it after you hear from the public. And what did that one person say over here or there on that issue? Total confusion. Total, and then the telephonic, you were warned before you went that the chaos would happen, and that's been proven. So I like to get on the election. Well, one more thing. The federal lobbyists, what did they do to deserve the money? What did they do? Now, a provident response by the mayor or someone on the floor here would say, well, it's good. They've done something for the borough. But you just don't give a check until you prove that that party has done something for the borough. And that is not documented before you want to extend that contract. Now I'll go on the election. And then I did all that on 3 minutes, so I want my 9 minutes.
You're doing good.
Okay?
You're doing good.
Thank you. The election. I don't believe there's anyone in this room that acknowledges the state of how elections run in this state. No one. Why? Because since April 3rd, 2012, in April, you've been told by me, the day after the election news reports there, people went to as many as 3 different precincts and couldn't get a ballot to vote. It was later determined that more than 40% of precincts there didn't have ballots to vote. The end result is it wasn't a case of not printing them, but there was not enough ballots in the precincts for people to vote. They certified the election 3 times. 3 times in the year. They found ballots later on. That's the state. It was the day after the election with those reports, I dropped everything I was doing. I said, what has happened? And I proceeded full time to do an independent investigation of the process of elections, of that situation. And it's brought me before you over the years, and elsewhere, you name it. But what I found is, and I've told you off the years, I declared this election in the borough over the years as illegitimate. No one won the election that you sit here. The public, everyone lost. Year after year. Now, there's a proposal here to go in a different direction. But over the years, I've not seen Anchorage or the Valley or elsewhere, the state, to show themselves doing it appropriately. But you're using the excuse of a virus situation to make it, okay, we can go that way. But you haven't done those elections before to do it the right way. And I remind you all, look at the numbers of people without this virus. The situation is of how many people really vote now. Fewer and fewer people vote here without this going this direction. What's going to happen? Now, I limit the time I can speak on this. If I had the time, I could tell you a lot of things about the election scenario. This doesn't look good. It frightens me. But I also want to say this thing. When I hear about the idea of the right to vote, I turn that word around. It's the responsibility of everyone to vote. I also remind you, too, that years ago, women could not vote. Yes, women could not vote. And what have we done is not question what's going on. Be involved. Let these rooms in this Borough Assembly be pretty much empty and pretty much meet in these rooms, or the Anchorage Assembly. It's given a messages, but now few people are in this room. But what do they know right now? They have not been involved for years. I've witnessed this common tragedy of looking the other way, that these elections are not transparent. These elections are not valid. And you're sitting before us, and you say make decisions, but frequently over the years, election officials in Palmer, in the borough, in Anchorage say, this attitude. Well, they voted us. We're going to do what I want to do. You know, they want us out, vote us out. That has been the attitude and remarks I heard from council members over the years. In Palmer, that's been the attitude. And then the result is this. The result is less people vote. And another result is few people are at school board meetings. Few people are at borough assembly meetings. How can we go forward in this tragic situation, an important situation right now, in dealing with the vote? And we do not know the unknown. With all the things they're saying about the virus is not a problem. The virus is a problem. It has resulted in a situation with the way in closing, with the way our elected officials have operated, and putting out statements over this issue, and creating a situation they provided a neglect to do it right. And as a result of the situation, one day the governor puts out a proposal. Remember these recommendations, I want to stress this. He's not saying you gotta do it, it's recommendations to do a mask or this or that. But when he does it, when he and his team, whoever they are, does it, he does it in such a short window for people to figure out what to do. And many businesses couldn't operate. Why couldn't we open? Because they have to get ready for it. Where are we going to get our face masks? Where are we going to get the wipes? How do we get our set up for people to go in? And to this day, it's an ongoing problem. And it results in this. And I want to stress this. For the thousands of Alaskans who decided to do something simple, who say, no, I'm not going to do it. We are in a situation, we're going to come back forward and reopen business. Business is not going to reopen properly until Alaskans feel comfortable walking in there. And when they're walking in there and seeing this kind of respect, and employees who are on the front line in Fred Meyer's, seeing now almost everyone in Palmer, Fred Meyer's, not wearing a mask, is that going to successfully reopen business? It's not. And then I'll leave you with this one last thing to point out. And I remind you of what I said before with permission. In the way this scenario has happened, the closure of businesses, the Targets and Walmarts were allowed to open up. Be open, while many Alaska businesses were told, no, you can't open up. Those Targets and Walmarts and so forth opened up, and they poured in very few locations where so many people concentrated themselves in a very small area. Whereas if they had allowed the business of Alaska to open up and stay open, that would have resulted in a less health risk, because they're not going to have that many people concentrated in one area. And that what that did too, in closing, it creates a situation when businesses were told to reopen, you can open up under these circumstances. That created a situation that Targets and the Walmarts and so forth had an unfair economic advantage. So when the businesses who try and say, now you can reopen up, now it's a question, can they reopen? And that's what's happening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now I guess we still have telephonic. Okay, so we'll take our first caller telephonically.
Keep on calling.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Moser, and I'm a Palmer resident. I'm just calling because, well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear the public's concerns on this issue. And I've got a couple of points that I wanted to address. The first being that in this day and age, we're constantly subjecting our own personal information to new technologies. I mean, the internet, the mail system isn't relatively new, but I think that that's another reason that we should probably trust it a little more, that we've already had a chance to feel it out. And there have been a lot of precautions put in place to protect people's information in these avenues of technology. So I think that allowing us to open up the voting populace to these methods that are at our disposal is probably a great idea, especially since we live in a place where people do live really far from city centers, or maybe they have jobs that take them to places where they can't get to a polling station. And I think that if there are people that have concerns about mail-in voting, to have those options available of a polling station is still completely valid, and that there are ways of keeping everybody's opinions on these issues. I guess that's about all that I have to say, and thank you for taking time to hear us out today.
Thank you. Next, telephonically, please.
This is Brad Empey. I used to be an advocate for mail-in voting quite a few years ago when Ms. Doty was on the assembly. But lately I've just been noticing that there's been a lot of fraud nationwide, and I don't know, the Butte Community Council, we sent out a survey through the clerk's office, and probably only half of the people out here in the Butte got the survey along with this burn fire safe and everything. So, I mean, do you guys actually have an accurate record of who all lives out in this area? I mean, it doesn't seem to be like that. And it costs a lot of money. I mean, it costs them a lot to do that down in voting. And the Valley's always trying not to imitate Anchorage, so I mean, anybody can do absentee ballot. You got 2-week early voting, and you got a polling place. There shouldn't be no mass mail-outs or anything like that until you know exactly who's in this borough and who's not. You know, people will get them and fill them out. You don't have no checks and balances on whether or not they sign them or anything, whether it's the right person. So it's a big no for me. I mean, it just ain't the right way to be. So that's it.
Thank you. Next, telephonically.
2 out of 30, Shelley.
Yeah, this is Logan Bean. I live in Palmer. I just wanted to call my support for mail-in voting. I don't think that it's as prone to fraud as everyone's making it out to be. I think there's opportunity for fraud in actual polls as well. We've seen that all over the country in the past. Regardless, I don't believe that it's as big of an issue as it's been made out to be, and I think the benefits outweigh any of the detriments of it. I think it's really important that everybody gets an opportunity to vote, and right now we're living in a time that's making it more difficult to be in a public place for a lot of people. And just know that there's a lot of people who are really uncomfortable with filling out in public still. Most people seem to be fairly comfortable with it at this point, but I just don't think that it's worth excluding those folks. I know there's a lot of folks who are really only shopping at businesses who are like showing the most caution. Now they are allowing people into their businesses, and people are being pretty picky that way. So I don't really see what the difference is either between mail-in voting and absentee voting. I'm not sure why that would cause any more problems than absentee voting, since it's all done by mail anyway. It just makes it more possible for more people to have their voice heard. So that's about it. Thank you for
public,
Tries
please?
to call in, did it now?
Hi, my name is Rachel Simental, and I'm a resident of Matsu Valley. And I am not an advocate for mail-in voting, and I vote no for mail-in voting. It's our constitutional right and privilege to be able to vote in person. Businesses are open, people can vote in person if they're going to be out shopping around. Just being safe and staying 6 feet apart, wearing masks, being careful, washing your hands. I'm an Air Force veteran for the United States, and I'm overseas. And my absentee mail-in ballot votes were never counted and are lost in the mail. And mail-in voting is a dangerous precedent to set. And there aren't any checks and balances set for current mail-in voting ballots. There's too much fraud going across the United States, and I'm definitely not an advocate for mail-in voting. And thank you for your time. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. Any more telephonic? Okay. We have another caller. Go ahead, please.
Hi, this is Sarah Avalos from Wasilla. I wanted to call in and lend my support for the mail-in voting. I do think that given the current condition with the crisis, with the pandemic, and how our numbers are beginning to rise again, it allows us the freedom of expressing ourselves as a whole, despite whether we're scared to go out or we're disabled, and have our voices heard. And I know that there's a lot of concern over fraud and a lot of media attention to the idea of fraud, but the statistics have shown that it's not nearly as prevalent as they're saying it is. So I just think it's a good avenue. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Any more telephonic callers? Okay, finish with telephonic. Is it Joe Carmen?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joe Carmen, born just down the road here, about 60 years ago. And I have a little background. I didn't get involved in politics until my family did. And when they won by 7 votes. If I would have voted, they would have won by 6. But in those days, we didn't have machines. You went to the polling booth, you got your paper, you showed your ID, you got your paper, you used something called a pen or a pencil, and you marked it. It went into a box. No machines counted it, people counted it. But the people that counted it were being watched by other people. They didn't go anywhere. Now, it used to be if you wanted to send a letter to the post office across town, it'd take 3 days. Because you put your letter in the post office, they come put it in a truck, take it to Anchorage, separate it, and bring it back to town and mail it. I don't know if they still do that. That's the way it used to be done. I really don't want people with that kind of mentality handling my vote. The integrity of the vote, I knew it was going to start going down as soon as they started bringing in the machines. So, it's not that I don't trust the postal system, I just don't trust all the people that it has to go through to get to where it's supposed to be. So I am opposed to this. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Any more telephonic? Okay, no more telephonic. Anyone else in the audience wish to speak? Otherwise, I'm going to close it out.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Assembly members. My name is Gordon Grace. I was coming here to talk about mail-in voting. I'm against that for all the reasons people have already kind of said. We've obviously got the option of doing in-person early voting and absentee voting. I think it's worth noting that there's an important distinction between absentee voting and the mail-in system that's being proposed. I've had to, being in the military previously, I've had to vote absentee, and I had to take an active part in that by applying to get a ballot. They had to verify that I was a registered voter, and then to send me that ballot to a ballot address. And that would be an important distinction from what we're talking about here with this mail-in system. So for the reasons of integrity of the ballot, from what people have said tonight, you can see that there are some serious questions from the voters about what are we degrading the integrity of our elections by going with the mail-in system. I think the answer is yes. The other concern I have is that for, as the Borough Assembly, you guys are entrusted with being good stewards of the public money. And by your own numbers here, you can see that a normal election costs us about $150,000. This mail-in, this proposed mail-in ballot initiative would be almost $500,000. So I mean, just on the face of it, that's just not good stewardship of the public money. Even if you take into account the protective measures, it's a significantly almost over $100,000 less than the mail-in system. And even with that, if you do end up pursuing the PPD election with the protective measures in place, I think there are ways that you can, if you're specifically looking at the total you have for mailings, $84,000. I believe if you really scrutinize that dollar amount, that even with protective measures, you should be able to do an election for not much over $300,000. So again, for stewardship purposes of public money, I really believe the mail-in ballot is a bad idea. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Should I close public testimony, audience participation? We have a telephonic, so welcome.
Hi, this is Sandy May, and I'm out here in Marcella, and I just want to vote against the mail-in ballot. There's been so much mess up and multiple ballots received by people in the Anchorage elections, and even friends of mine that live in there have said that they received 12 ballots at a time, and anyway, I don't think it's a safe way to go, and most people actually want to get out and vote themselves. If we can go to Walmart and stand in lines or whatever, we can surely show up and vote. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for calling. Anybody else telephonically? That's all. Anybody else in the room? Okay, with that, I'll close public testimony and audience participation at this point in time. We'll take a recess.
Mayor, you want to do cake?
Want to do cake right now? Let's
well.
do cake. I forgot about that. There's cake for Mr. Boosie, so it's your lucky night, folks.
All right, thank you everybody for tuning in tonight. Appreciate it. Don't forget to share. Facebook squeals on you if you don't share. Tonight was about mail-in voting here in the Matsu Valley. Overwhelming testimony to not have mail-in voting. Lots of good examples of why that will not be a positive thing for the state to do, and for why it isn't a positive thing just for the Matsu Valley to be voting upon. Don't hesitate to be a participant in these things when they happen. Call in, testify. Just give your 2 cents on what you're thinking about the issues. It's the way to be able to change what is happening in our state and in our own communities and cities that we live in. We had approximately, I would say, 50 different people that testified tonight. There was only about 4, I would say 3, but 4 people that actually gave testimony. The most of them that at the very end came up was 2 more people that just kind of added to the list, and there could have been a 5th, but they were wishy-washy and didn't really give a positive, affirmative, or a negative. A lot of the complaints that I heard for those that were in the opposition to that, to want to have the mail-in voting happening, They fail to point out the very obvious to everybody out there about what can be done, and it's called absentee ballot. If you are a PFD recipient, it only takes a second to sign yourself up for the absentee ballots to have them mailed to you, and that eliminates the issue that they're talking about today about trying to make this a mandatory mail-in whether you want it or not. The absentee ballot is the easiest and most simplest method, and it will guarantee that not extra ballots are being sent out. As one person pointed out, we could have 30,000 of them just thrown into the trash. Households are getting 12 different ones from different people. How long have you lived there? How many other people live there? How many have registered to vote there? We don't know that here in the Matsu Valley, and that is the reason why we're number one opposition to what is going on. Again, thanks for tuning in tonight, and don't forget to share.
With a by-mail election process for the November 3rd, 2020 regular election only.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The public testimony is over. We'll waive a staff report tonight. Senator Mayfield, could you move this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Move to adopt resolution 20-053. I'd like to speak to this. I think first off, there's not, from the public perspective, there does seem to be a lot of confusion in regards to this particular resolution. But I'd like to talk about a couple of things that were really brought up as being prevalent candidates against any kind of change in the in-person voting system. First off, there's really no evidence of widespread fraud, according to numerous investigations and studies. The President Trump's own voter fraud investigation committee disbanded without producing any evidence as to voter fraud. And there was an exhaustive investigation done from 2000 to 2012, which found probable or alleged 491 cases of alleged fraud out of 146 million votes. So, I mean, we're talking about, no system is perfect, in-person voting and mail-in voting, are not perfect systems. Neither system is, but no matter what our political beliefs are, those of us who believe in participatory government should never object to a measure that would or could lead to more participation in government and more participation in our decisions. And I alluded to the fact that there may be some confusion in regards to this particular ordinance, and I think most people were thinking that this was an ordinance or a resolution that would advocate a total mail-in voting system. That is not necessarily the case, and it's not a permanent. And what we're proposing here is not a permanent solution to or permanent application in regards to voting. What it is kind of taking some precautions in regards to the COVID-19 pandemic. And, while Alaska, and particularly the Matsu, have done a really good job of keeping our numbers down, there's really no way for us to predict what may happen in November, whether there will be a recurrence or not. And so this is just kind of hedging our bet. And so mailing residents a ballot, which would be essentially the same as a absentee ballot, and still keeping some select locations open to where people can do in-person voting, gives both the opportunity for additional participation in government to those who can't or don't want to go out and still gives the availability for people who want to, and I'm one of those, I'm one of those people who likes to vote in person. So it would give me an opportunity to go to one of these locations and vote in person. And so those places aren't closing down. It's just, we're not keeping every precinct open. But there will be places for folks to vote in person. So, I'd really like to invite the clerk up to talk about describing the validation process of an address or a person, as well as describing the process of how a person would vote, and what secure measures we have in regards to that.
Madam Clerk?
If I could clarify just very quickly, are you talking about the modified by mail process, or are you talking about the current precinct process? I'm assuming the modified by mail.
That's correct.
So the borough uses the state of Alaska's voter rolls. There's probably going to be about 20% of those voters that don't have a current mailing address. We're guessing at 20%. That's what we were told by a contractor who helps with by-mail elections. Those are voters that have not updated their voter registration or could have moved out of state. So the first intent would be to send out a mailer, because if we are going to do this, I want to be very clear to the voters that this is what is happening. I assume we're going to get returns, meaning they were undeliverable. I would also do a second mailing to make sure we're catching all the undeliverable mailing addresses. Those undeliverable mailing addresses would not receive a ballot. A ballot would not be mailed out to those undeliverables. So when we mail out a ballot, it has all the information inside. It basically tells you how to vote it, that you need a witness signature. So once that person votes a ballot, they put it inside an envelope that's contained inside the main envelope. They have to sign it. They have to provide an identifier. And basically when they're signing it, we're going to create somewhat a different verification, not verification, but they're basically signing that they are qualified to vote that ballot and they will not vote in any other manner in the election. They do have to provide an identifier, which is a birth date, the voter number, the last 4 digits of their social security number or a whole social security number. They also have to have a witness signature. That witness signature could be their husband, their wife, it could be the postmaster, it could be a notary. Those ballots will be mailed back into the borough. We will probably also talk to Anchorage about using their fireproof drop boxes in some of the bigger locations. The one thing that I would like to do is get in contact with the canvas board just so we can come up with a process in writing on how we're going to move through this. The way I would envision this happening is that the ballots, we'd have to start canvassing those ballots right away. It's not anything we can wait to do. Normally when we canvass absentee ballots, we start the day after election. We'll be receiving way too many ballots to be able to start doing that process the day after election, because voters expect results election day. We'd have to start canvassing those ballots. I'm assuming at this time we probably have about 10 canvas board members. We process them as they come in. We're going to be checking that they are still at that point in time when that ballot comes in, that they're a registered voter at that residence, that they've signed it, that they've provided an identifier, and that they've had a witness signature. So those are the steps that we would go through. You know, when we at some point we're going to open the ballots, but I really want the canvas board to be a part of that process, because they're the ones that are in control of the security of all that information and all those ballots when they come in. We would definitely get them ready to count prior to election day. They would probably go through the scanner. However, no election results would be printed until 8 p.m. election day, because that is what the normal process and what we have in Borough Code. And did I answer all those questions, Assemblymember Mayfield?
I think you did.
I have one. So vote in person is still, under this system, you can still vote in person.
You could vote in person at absentee locations. Right now we have the Matsu Borough is an absentee in-person location. The Division of Elections in Wasilla is another location that is moving actually to the library in Wasilla. We also have the City of Houston, we have the Trapper Creek Library, and we have the Talkeetna Library. Those places will still be open 2 weeks prior to election.
I'm sorry, jump in.
Yeah, so as far as a person who wants to vote but didn't receive a ballot, how would we handle that? Would there be a process available for them to receive a ballot here locally?
So I see that as is what we do with our absentee process. We have a database that we can write notes in. So I'm going to give you an example of an absentee by mail person. We have mailed them a ballot. They realize they've given us the wrong address. So that ballot might have gone to some town in Arizona. They contact us. We send them another ballot. We write notes in the field that this person has received 2 ballots. And we will never send out a second ballot to somebody without making sure we are tracking that. And then another option, if they're in here, in the Matsu Borough, they're in the state, it's not anything we have to mail out again, they always have the option to go to an absentee site.
Mr. McKee and Mr. Sumner.
I'm going to vote against this resolution. I want to give you just a short dissertation as to why. As an American citizen, I consider it an obligation as well as a privilege to cast a ballot, okay, in person, to go in and show my ID. Why is that so valuable to me? Well, for 3 years, I lived in a country where sometimes the local committee would say, don't vote. And if you did, you were visited that night and they killed you and your family, your wife and your children, okay, for voting. That was, but the interesting thing to me, knowing that the right to vote was sufficiently strong that people actually did it and paid the price. Okay? So to me, being able to vote is a real privilege, and I'll vote against it.
I just wanted to add to what Mr. McKee said. I agree with Mr. McKee. I like going into a polling location and voting. That's how I like to vote. The concern I have for this year is that the election officials that we have tend to be 65 and older. They have said, there's some experts that have said that we probably will have another round of COVID in the fall. I don't like working with the unknowns when we're talking about an election. It's unknown how many election officials may drop out, which I suspect we will have a lot if this was to happen again. I don't like the unknown if precincts locations will still let us use their location. I want to make sure voters have the right to vote. I want to make sure that we have enough election officials to run precinct locations. And right now, it's an unknown. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Sumner.
So the post office has been around since 1792, so I'm sure that this is not an idea that's not been thought of before. And part of the reason why we've run our election system the way we have for the last 228 plus years is because while there's no perfect system of voting, a system where you go to your precinct, you cast a ballot, that ballot is voted or is counted there at the precinct is the most secure way to vote. There's not an opportunity, at least not a simple opportunity, to have a global corruption of voting or of an election. When it's conducted that way, it would require far more resources than when ballots are aggregated in one location. There's significant chain of custody concerns with vote by mail. People may not receive ballots. Their ballots may be mailed. They may think they voted and they may not be received by the borough. They may be received far later. Now, this proposal, where we're proposing to mail every registered voter a ballot, is not going to generate a whole heck of a lot more people voting than if we just advertise people, to people that they can vote an absentee ballot. They can fill out an absentee request form. Anybody that would be unwilling to fill out an absentee request form is probably not going to fill out their ballot anyway. And so for some marginal gain in the amount of people voting, we're going to have thousands and thousands of ballots flying around through the mail. And we don't need fraud for there to be issues. All that you need is people to not have faith in the election, whether properly based or not. It's very important that people have faith in their election process. So I would very much be opposed to moving in this direction. There's also another significant concern. In Alaska, we do have a significant problem with domestic violence. Now, part of being able to vote is being able to cast a secret ballot where you are not subject to influence or potential violence when you cast it. We cannot guarantee when all these ballots are mailed out that nobody will have a spouse or partner that will stand over their shoulder. And maybe it won't be even something that's said, but there will be that influence. And I would encourage us to not allow that, to maintain the precinct level voting. Let's not mail out unrequested ballots. Let's heavily advertise for people that we can have, that they can request an absentee ballot, and encourage them to request an absentee ballot. But let's not just mail everybody a ballot. There's no good reason for that. Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I still support this resolution. I've actually watched the canvass board verify absentee ballots. Typically there's, I don't know, at least 5, maybe 7 people in the room, and they look at every single ballot. Every person in that room looks at each ballot. It is painfully boring to watch. It takes hours and hours to do just a handful of names. But I have utmost respect for the process and total faith in the system. I think this is the direction we need to go. This was not a conversation I was planning to have. I did not expect to have community members who seriously are not going to Home Depot. They're not waiting in line at cars. We don't know what this fall is going to bring. We do not want to be stuck in a situation, 4 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks before the election where we're scrambling to make this available. We want to make sure this option is ready to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hale and Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I take the idea that there might be a resurgence in the COVID-19 during our election very seriously, and I take the clerk's concerns very seriously as far as not having enough election workers or not having enough precincts. And in fact, there are 50 poll worker applications on the table out back there. So if anyone here is interested in being a poll worker, I understand we need about 95 more poll workers if all 41 of the precincts are open. I also want to say that I think that vote by mail is super cool. I think, with the proper safeguards in place, it is just as secure and just as effective as any kind of in-person voting. However, those kind of safeguards do take time to put into place. And talking with the clerk this afternoon, we need signatures for all of the voters to compare against the signatures on the ballots. We need signature analyzing machines Apparently they use those in Anchorage to compare the signatures on file with the signatures on the ballot. We need poll workers who have been specially trained in signature verification by the FBI for the ballots that the machines kick back because they think that the signatures may not line up. And those kind of things are not the kind of things that we can put in place before the November election, which is why the clerk has put forward the idea that maybe we send everyone an absentee ballot, whether they have requested it or not. And I think that the safeguards are not there. If you get an absentee ballot in the mail and you decide you don't want to vote that ballot, and you want to go down to the precinct instead and vote in person, you have to either bring that ballot with you and show it to them that you have not voted that ballot, or you have to vote a question ballot. And then the other problem I have is having precincts closed, because the state more than likely is going to have all their precincts open. And if someone goes down to the precinct and says, votes their state ballot, and then turns around and wants to vote their borough ballot, and they're not there to be voted because our precincts are closed, and maybe they've thrown away that absentee ballot that we sent them. They're going to howl, and they're not going to have faith in our electoral process. So the thing I would like to do instead, I would like to take $500,000 worth of CARES Act money and give that to the clerk over and above her normal budget for the election, in order to do things like PPE, preparations to ensure that the people, the poll workers, the people who are there to vote, everyone is safe, the surfaces are wiped down regularly, all the PPE and the preparations that are going to be necessary to make sure that those folks don't get sick. And then I would also like her to engage in a comprehensive campaign to encourage absentee voting this election cycle. So I have prepared a amendment to this resolution, and I had the clerk run off some copies of my chicken scratches here. You all should have one. So I would like to make a motion if I could. I would move that in the fourth whereas, we strike the word primary and then in the ninth whereas, we strike going by mail and instead write encouraging absentee voting. And in the 10th whereas, do the same, strike going by mail and insert encouraging absentee voting. Then strike in their entireties the 11th, 12th, and 13 whereases. And in the first, be it resolved, strike by mail election for the regular election in 2020 and insert comprehensive campaign to encourage absentee voting in the 2020 regular election, including at a minimum 2 mailings, one of which is an absentee ballot application. And then in the second, be it resolved, striking the word a and turning election into a plural by adding s at the end.
Union button, need for.
This in writing, so do the 7 members have copies of that in writing? Okay. I don't. Okay, so we're gonna debate the amendment first. We'll make sure everybody.
We're voting on the amendment?
We're gonna debate the amendment first.
Debate the amendment.
You just made it. Everybody ready? Mr. Mayfield, I guess you get your end up.
So, my understanding of the amendment would be that Assemblyman Dale is suggesting that basically the borough clerk and the assembly strongly encourage people to absentee vote, but to leave all the polling places open, and But the fact of the matter is, we still don't have poll workers, and we're trying to stop this, or at least put the brakes on this COVID pandemic. And I would just as soon not have people expose themselves to this kind of thing. I mean, I know we can wear masks, we can actually wear gloves, we can get in there, we can wipe down every surface in between voters, and maybe that's an okay thing to do, but it's going to take additional personnel, additional resources to do that. Right now, we don't have any assurance that we're going to have those resources in November, only because of the timing of this thing. So, I guess it's not that this amendment is a bad idea, but I'm going to have to probably say I'll vote against it.
Madam Clerk.
I just have a question, and I apologize to Assemblymember Hill, and you handed this to me earlier. The be it further resolved clause, I'm not quite sure what that might mean.
The be it further resolved clause would be asking you to bring us a legislation that outlines the changes that would need to occur to conduct by mail elections.
Oh, in the future?
In the future, yes.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So, Madam Clerk, this motion would basically leave all polling places open and strongly encourage absentee voting by mail. That's the amendment. Is that correct? Okay. Mr. Leonard, you were hand to hand a long time ago, but I know this is a different issue, different amendment.
I'm really torn on this amendment because I do agree. Oh. I'm on. So I think everyone, well, it's hard because I was originally going to talk about the original amendment. I find this very interesting. When we first started discussing this during the middle of the COVID, it was concerns about people needing to know that they have different options to vote. It wasn't that we were going to throw out our full system that we've utilized to go to pretty much throw the votes, or throw the voters' ballots out into air into the post office. It was to inform the citizens of what their opportunities were, that they could use absentee voting if they were worried about coming to the poll place. I do very much worry about the integrity of the elections, just as what Assemblymember Hales said. When the Anchorage put this in, they could have gone with just identifiers. They actually did develop a system where they are comparing signatures in a database. And another thing that is very interesting to me, as we've talked about other things that are fundamentally changing how we do business in the borough, i.e. a strong form of mayor, or a first-class borough, or those type of things, they said, we can't do that now. We need to allow the people the opportunity to speak to this through an election. So again, I think we do have the systems in place through the absentee ballots, and rushing into this based on fear is not the way to go, because it does bring up the question about the integrity of our elections. I mean, we have had so many elections in this valley that have been won by 5 to 10 votes. I mean, mayoral elections, I remember back there, and you could tell me with Charlie Bannon and Mayor Anderson, was it 10 to 12 won? I mean, so, yeah, if there are errors with this election, it fundamentally can change our borough, and I'm not willing to go to a full system or vote for a resolution that would change our system so fundamentally for this election at this time. And based on that, I'd probably vote for Assemblymember Hale's amendment. I'm still wanting to, before anything that would be complete vote by mail, that it go to the voters. Thank you, Mayor.
Well, if I recall, I won by a tremendous landslide tonight. 98 votes, I think it was, first night, so they're always close. And who else we got? So we're still on the motion, basically. Mr. Hale's motion. Ms. Bobby.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to oppose this amendment for 2 reasons. First of all, I don't think it addresses the poll worker concern. Typically, we have a hard time getting poll workers on. He's advertising for poll workers up until, seems like weeks before the event, and that was before we were anticipating having to compete with the state for that same group of poll workers, and any COVID concerns. My second concern is more about opening up the precinct buildings. I'm not sure these are buildings, we potentially want to run hundreds of people through. There are schools, there are churches, there are fire stations, there are senior centers. I know in the north there are already going to be challenges with holding 2 elections at the same time. Then if we have to do any sort of social distancing, these people are going to be in the parking lot. It's November. That's not fair. So I don't think we want. I don't think we want to use the buildings we typically use. I would hate to be associated with an outbreak of any kind. Thank you.
Mr. Hale?
Yeah, I absolutely respect Assemblywoman Bobby's concerns about poll workers and about polling locations. I would just point out that the state is going to have polling locations open in the general, and so those people will be going through those buildings regardless of whether they're voting on ballots or not. And I would also point out that $500,000 could go a long ways towards attracting the poll workers that we need by increasing their wages or whatever it takes to attract those workers that we need.
Mr. Leonard? Then Mr. Summer. Seniority first, please.
And again, I agree with Mr. Hale. I believe that if we come to an election cycle and poll workers are needed, that Alaskans, especially in the Matsu, will step up for this. So I believe that we will find a way to get the poll workers that we need to keep our precincts open, or we'll come up with a creative way to do it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, on this one warehouse here, 3 down, maybe the 4th one. At the time of the writing of this resolution, the State Division of Elections has not officially announced a decision how they will be conducting primary and general elections. Have they since announced?
Mr. Mayor, they have announced that they are going to have precinct-based voting for the primary. The division director has made it clear they don't know so far for the general. They haven't made a decision on that one yet.
I thought so. I just wanted to be sure. Who's on? I think you had Mr. Sumner.
Yeah, I'd have to say that I support Mr. Hale's amendment as a significant improvement to this ordinance. But I would move a secondary motion to alter the be it further resolved to read, be it further resolved that the borough clerk is directed to bring forward legislation to put on the ballot changes that would need to occur to conduct a by-mail election. Or,
Mr. Mayfield, I may have the attorney address this as far as.
Thank you. But we are talking about by mail election. This isn't an ordinance for you know, for a permanent address to, in other words, there's no contemplation of having mail-in ballots next year. That's a decision that the Assembly would make at some point in the future if they want to do that. But this resolution, in its amended form or in its original form, doesn't talk about anything other than this year. What this election in November, what's going to happen in this election in November. So, I mean, there really is no need for, in fact, I think it really complicates the issue if we were to approve that amendment. I'm not quite even sure how it would be interpreted in regards to this.
Let's take the one amendment at a time here right now. We're on Mr. Hales. You moved to secondary amendment.
Secondary.
I do have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
I do have a question for Assemblymember Sumner and Assemblymember Hale in reference to putting this forward on the ballot. Now, we only have, I do believe, 2 more assembly meetings, and I want to clarify, are you wanting to put it forward in this year's election, or is that something you want to look at later down the road for maybe next year's election?
Mr. Hale.
My thought would be to take that up at a later time as to whether or not it's something that we should consider for next year's election.
As I understood, Mr. Sumner, that you were changing to put this on the ballot, which kind of takes out trying to crack the problems that may occur this fall. That's
well, I didn't
the
say.
issue is.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I didn't say that we would be placing it on the ballot. I read this to be a resolution directing the clerk to bring forward example legislation. And so my amendment would just be that when that example legislation is brought forward, it be for a ballot proposition. That's not to say that it will automatically pass.
Madam Clerk?
I apologize, I'm not trying to confuse things. I just want to get clarification. So when I read Assemblymember Hale's, be it for the resolve clause, I read it as, I'll bring forward a resolution, hey Assembly, this is what we would need to do. I wasn't reading it as code changes or anything like that to actually do it. So I hope I read that correctly.
Then I withdraw.
Thank you. I was hoping we'd get to that. Okay, on Mr. Hale's amendment. Any, Ms. Nowers?
I have the same concerns about integrity. I think there's a lot of evidence out there that by mail can be used, but I think it's also the appearance of integrity, and we're still trying to work this out on the fly, and that's not a comfortable situation to be in when you're trying to guarantee to the public that you not only got it covered, but you have the appearance. So I'm struggling with going to a by mail. I wonder if the clerk could walk us through how the verification of an absentee ballot, does that vary any way from a mail-in ballot? Or is it the same verification process? And then I have another question.
To Assemblymember Nowers, there is a difference between true by mail voting and what is being suggested here. True by mail voting, it's a system where you're sending out the ballots just like we would. However, the verification is a witness or a signature. We don't, I know the state of Alaska is better with how many signatures of voters they have in their system. They're not there yet. So any municipality that wants to go true by mail would have to do some sort of signature drive to try to get voters to put in their signatures, sort of like what Anchorage did. With the absent, I'm going to call it a modified or a hybrid absentee or a by mail process, is we would be using what we already have established in code for the absentee process. The voter signs it, signs the envelope. The voter provides a witness, or not, excuse me, a identifier, which is either a birth date, social, or a last four digits social security number, or a voter number. And then a witness signature signs it, saying they witnessed that voter sign the envelope.
So can I follow up with that? So the absentee ballots, the only difference is they are taking the active step to request it versus a hybrid by mail where we'd be mailing that to them.
So if you're referencing our regular absentee, that would be correct. The absentee vote, the voter would request a by mail application. What's being suggested here is that by mail application would not, we wouldn't need one. All registered voters would receive a ballot.
So, through the mayor to Assemblywoman Nowers, that is, the key difference is that right now to get an absentee ballot, you have to request it. And so instead of requesting it, you would be sent an absentee ballot whether you wanted one or not, which then creates the problem of if you decide you're not going to vote that ballot and you want to go to an in-person location such as the borough or the division of elections, you then have to bring that ballot with you or vote a question ballot. And I think it speaks directly to the appearance of integrity that if you know that you're registered to vote in your precinct and you go to the in-person location and they force you to vote a question ballot and you don't know if that vote's going to count, that if it was me, I would howl about it, and so I think that rather than sending everyone an absentee ballot, we should send everyone an absentee ballot application and take a strong effort to promote the absentee ballots with the mailings, with advertisements in print and radio and television and on the internet. And we have this CARES money that is meant to be used to defray the costs associated with the COVID-19. And I think election security and moving forward with an election where people can remain healthy and can have faith that their vote was counted, I think those are excellent uses of the COVID CARES money. And so that's why I've offered this amendment. And I won't have anything more to say about it.
Mayor, I agree with Assemblymember Hale. Again, a key to his amendment is that you do go through the step of requesting an application. It's my understanding. Is that correct?
You would get an application by mail whether you ask for an application or not, but you would have to request the ballot.
And I think that's key to the integrity instead of just sending everyone out a ballot. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I call the question.
Call the question on Mr. Hale's amendment. Madam Clerk, please read the amendment quickly. It was to $500,000.
The amendment on the floor, Mr. Mayor, is to the resolution itself. In fourth whereas clause, you take out primary and strike the S off elections. It is also in the 9th and 10th whereas clause to replace going by mail to encourage absentee voting, striking the 11th, 12th, and 13th whereas clauses, and changing the now therefore be it resolved clause to read that the Matsu Borough Assembly directs the borough clerk to conduct a comprehensive campaign to encourage absentee voting in the 2020, regular election, including at a minimum 2 mailings, one of each is a absentee ballot application, and be it further resolved that the borough clerk is directed to bring forward legislation that outlines the changes that would need to occur to conduct by-mail elections.
Okay. Any objection to that amendment passing?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Keith's objecting, so Madam Clerk, conduct a vote, please.
Assemblymember Hale.
Yes.
Assemblymember Nowers.
Yes.
Assemblymember McKee.
No.
Assemblymember Leonard.
Yes.
Assemblymember Mayfield.
Yes.
Assemblymember Sumner.
Yes.
Assemblymember Bovee. Yes. Mr. Mayor, it passed with Assemblymember McKee opposed.
Okay, now to the resolution 20053 as amended. Are you ready to vote? Any objection to voting? Any objection to passing?
No.
Okay, we got an objection to passing 20053 as amended. Madam Clerk, conduct a vote, please.
Assemblymember Nowers.
Yes.
Assemblymember McKee.
No.
Assemblymember Leonard.
Yes.
Assemblymember Mayfield.
Yes.
Assemblymember Bovee. Yes. Assemblymember Sumner.
No.
Assemblymember Hale.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, it passed with Assemblymember McKee and Sumner opposed.
Okay, thank you. Now, let's go back to our original order of ordinances. Madam Clerk, we'll start with 20047 and resolution 20045, please.
An ordinance providing for the sale of certain borough-wide real property acquired through tax foreclosure for delinquent real property tax years 2013 and prior, and special assessment for 2014 and prior, and not needed for public purpose.
Okay. We'll wait the staff report. Public hearing is closed at this point in time. Mr. Mayfield, can you move this?
I move to adopt ordinance 20-045, and you have the amendment, please.
Go ahead.
I move to remove the following properties from tax sale.
Thank you all for joining us today. Don't forget to share. It looks like they've amended it to where they're now going to mail out a application for absentee ballots so that you would be able to if you choose to, you fill out the ballot, the application and mail it in to get your absentee ballot. If you don't want to do the absentee ballot and you want to show up at the polls, you just show up like regular and go and vote. But by doing this, they're thinking about or planning on using part of the COVID money to pay for the extra precautions that will be necessary to be able to hire more people so that they can clean stations and whatnot in between each poller. Some of the steps are a little bit benign at the moment, considering what we are continuously learning about COVID as it stands. But currently, as what they have just voted as of a 7-2 vote, that the mail-in ballots are not going to be mail-in. They're just going to mail you an application. Everybody that is on the voters register should get an application to sign up to become an absentee ballot and receive it that way. If you choose to fill out the application, that way you don't have to go into the polls. It is your choice. But if you don't fill out the absentee application, then you should be going to the polls and doing it the good old-fashioned way, which has the most integrity. This seemed to be, at least in my opinion, this was a good compromise for what they did decide to do in the end, but still unnecessary. This has definitely been a Democratic push agenda, especially if you follow their pages like I have been. Every single one of them has been telling you to call in, write in, testify, that mail-in voting is the only way, and people are going to die. People are going to get sick if they have to go into the polling places. That's not within our Constitution. It takes away our free rights of choice that we should have available to us, and it shouldn't be a unilateral decision based on 9 people without the constituents that they represent. There's over 120,000 of us in the Valley area that they should be asking for permission to do something like this. Again, don't hesitate to share. As you can see, the person in the red shirt there, Dan Mayfield, he was one of the main instigators of this bill that was being pushed out there today. And we've learned, as when they had the Second Amendment issue that came up here in the Valley, that if you follow exactly what is being said on the Democrats' pages, that is exactly his wording and verbiage verbatim. It's almost identical to the rhetoric that you see going on there. And just like before, I'm really surprised that they even voted on this. And their biggest concern is having enough people to run the polling places in November. And honestly, if you were to tell people that this is not a volunteer to work the polling places, that you actually get paid to work them, that they'll have a lot more people sign up. And so when you talk to people out there and they're curious about what it takes to become a polling person, just throw out the incentive that they can get paid for this. And another side note, this, if they are on unemployment or anything like that along those regards, there is not enough money generated in the short term that you'd be working these polling places to affect your ability to still collect your unemployment as is. So there is always that out there for those that are thinking that I'm on unemployment, but I really want to work something because this sounds like a good idea, but I don't want to lose it, that it won't happen. Again, so don't hesitate to share. Appreciate you guys all joining us for the second half of this and with the vote, and you all have a great night. Thanks.